It's 3 minutes after 10. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Have you ever had... I was just reading a lovely story about Jess Phillips pretending she was sick in order to avoid having to defend Peter Mandelson during the dog days of that scandal, which probably signalled the beginning of the end for Keir Starmer, didn't it? Or the end of the beginning of the end. I'm thinking about bosses. I'm thinking about also life. When you really don't want to do something, or you think something is impossible, but you know you have to try. Do you know that feeling? Do you remember that feeling? We talked yesterday about the impact that the COVID experience, not the virus, but the experience of COVID management and lockdowns and the rest of it will have had on young people, and how big a part it might have played in the domination of NEETs now, the demographic domination of NEETs, the 1 million NEETs. And I'm trying to think of ways of distilling it down to nice, easily digestible sentences and statements. And this idea of being frightened of the world is too vague, it's too nebulous. It's what did you not learn? You didn't learn that thing when you really don't want to do something, or you think something is impossible, but you have to try. I think the reason why Bob remains quite high, the Burnham Optimism Barometer, which is now standing at 8 for the third week running, only among the incredibly unscientific and self-selecting contributors to the Burnham Optimism Barometer at 10:10 every Monday morning on LBC. But one of the reasons why it remains high, albeit that we're only talking about a 3-week window, is because I think Burnham is kind of encapsulating that at the moment. It doesn't mean it will work. Please don't think that I'm putting on rose-tinted spectacles or engaging in excessive optimism. But he is looking at things that I think previous politicians have looked at and shrugged or despaired. And he is sort of saying, well, we have to. Well, we have to. And if you were looking for a friendly or a kindly way of describing what perhaps those young people, many of those young people lost as a consequence of being desocialised during COVID, it's that moment in your life where you kind of have to. Well, we just have to. We have to. I don't want to do it any more than you do, and we're probably going to fail, but we have to try. We've got to go to the end. Am I making sense? That kind of psychological process, really, in which we do things that we, A, don't want to do, and or B, don't think we're going to succeed at. And you kind of have to do it. It's really I think, and I only had the thought about 8 minutes ago, forgive me if it's not fully fleshed out, but I think it's one of the most important things that we do during that period of our life that we were talking about yesterday. And I was thinking about it this morning on two fronts. The first, most obviously, is when he says to the Justice Secretary, I don't care, you've got to find a way to keep Andrew Harper's killers in jail. You've got to find a way to do it. We're going to talk about that later in the programme, because it's not necessarily a good thing, although it does fit this theory that I'm currently fleshing out with you with regard to just saying, well, no, I don't care. We have to do it. I don't care how hard it is. I don't care if it does this. We have to do it. And that's it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because it opens you up to failure and to all the other things as well that could go along with it. But it has to be done. So he's done that. He's told the Justice Secretary he has to find a way to keep PC Andrew Harper's killers in jail. And Angela Rayner has been doing the interview rounds this morning. No one pulling any sickies at the moment when asked to defend Andy Burnham's performance or decisions, and she insisting that they will find a way of doing it. And then we come to one of my historically favourite subjects of all the subjects that we talk about together. We come to the British High Street. And this is what he's posted. Andy Burnham, this is the tweet, unfortunately. I don't know, we'll have a conversation again soon about whether the government should still be on that hell site. Vape shops, betting shops, dodgy businesses. If you look at your high street these days and think, who asked for this, you're not alone. I'm doing something about it. We're giving local people and councils more control over what opens and tougher powers to crack down on businesses that aren't good for our communities. For too long, Westminster has stood by while our high streets declined. That ends now. It's very much part of the pattern of politics that seems to be taking hold at the moment, the prime ministerial politics that seems to be saying people want change. People want this to be different. It might be quite a little thing, but the previous pattern has been, there's nothing we can do about that, hasn't it? I mean, that was the pattern with Andrew. It's an odd parallel to draw, but that's the problem with a theory that's only just come out of your brain 8, 10, 9 minutes ago. It's what he's doing with Andrew Harper's killers, and it's what he's doing with the high street. Other politicians have looked at it and shrugged, or not shrugged, despaired. They've just gone, no, we can't do this. And he might fail, of course, and that will probably not be forgiven, particularly on the Andrew Harper front. For too long, Westminster has stood by while our high streets declined. That ends now. That ends now. I think you might need a little bit more from me before you ring in, but if you don't, ring in now. Can Andy Burnham halt the decline of British high streets? And I obviously hope he can, but I would inevitably ask you how. How can you halt the decline of British high streets? I wonder how kindly or how closely you listen to this programme over the years. Do you know what I usually reach for now? Not my own time in River Island on Worcester High Street. Nick had a call towards the end of his show from a high street, from a commercial landlord on a high street I know well. Not my time in River Island or even my time on Regent Street in Aquascutum. I reach now for a pub in Leicester Square. And this, I don't know why I think about this whenever we turn our attention to this subject. Because a pub in Leicester Square has no lessons, really, for a commercial landlord in Kidderminster. Does he? Does it? I don't know. But the reason why I think of it is because I used to walk past it every day on my way to this studio. And how long have we been in now? About 15 years we've been in this building. So, I mean, for a long time. And Leicester Square was undergoing a period of redevelopment. And I could not understand why this pub was empty. It was a pub smack in the middle of Leicester Square, just down near the library. I can't even remember what it was called anymore, but I couldn't... I find the sight of an empty pub quite dispiriting at the best of times, which is also a conversation that we've had, and is probably linked to the decline of the high street quite closely when you think about it. But commercially, and I'm not very good at commercial things, commercially I couldn't understand why it was empty until the day that I did. And the reason why it was empty was because there was no point opening it. There was no point going to... because it was obviously going to be bought, knocked down and turned into part of a massive hotel at some point in the not-too-distant future. And that, dear listener, is exactly what happened. So empty premises are not always sad stories. But Leicester Square must constitute some of the most expensive and productive real estate, profitable real estate on the planet. I don't know how profitable it is, actually. We have quite a high turnover of restaurants in the heart of Leicester Square, where we sit every day, where we work every day. But still, you take my point. So I started thinking, well, if the shops are empty, then landlords are either losing money or standing still or another. Theory 3 that I can't quite get my head around. And if a landlord is losing money, why don't they rent it out to somebody who can't afford to pay market rate rent? But listen, no one can currently afford to pay market rate rent because the premises is empty, right? And so along comes not a betting shop, although you may consider them a scourge upon your high street. They make a lot of money, so they can pay their way. But along comes a business that may not be properly registered for tax, or a business that may be a front for a money laundering operation, or a business that may be, I don't know, some sort of vanity project. Again, to stay in Leicester Square for a moment. I'll never forget a little shop that opened around the corner from here, a little cafe that opened, where every single thing on the menu was mango related. And I remember walking past it and thinking, that's not going to... I'm no expert on it, but every single product they sold had mangoes in it. And I thought, that must be the child of a very rich man who's just been given some money to open a mango related... I wanted it to flourish. I wanted it to thrive. I went in there once. I can only take so much mango related food or drink in a day. And it didn't... I don't think it did. I'm going to check now, aren't I? And there's going to be about 500 of them. There's going to be branches of the thing all over the world, and I could have bought shares in the early day. But you see what I mean? It's either going to be losing money, standing completely still, which means you own the freehold. Does it? and therefore, you don't have many outgoings or overheads to pay on an empty premises, or something else is going on. And that's why I have a beautiful dissonance this morning when it comes to Andy Burnham's ambition to fix the high street, to fix the British high street. I don't think he can, and yet I really want him to. I don't think he can because of all the things I don't understand and that I've just shared with you there. The idea that an empty premises, an occupied premises is better than an empty premises. And if there was something else that could be in that premises now, it would be there. Why are British high streets in such a state? 0345 60600973. Can Andy Burnham improve things? And if so, how? 0345 60600973 is the number that you need. And get on board with this, because I think the reason why I find conversations about high streets so enduringly powerful is because it's something with which almost every single one of us has a relationship. Do you know what I mean? I don't know what your memory is. I've got a few. My memory would involve, there used to be a Marks and Spencer's in so Kidderminster and Brentford are the towns I currently know. And they're at almost opposite ends of this conversation. Kidderminster is very much a town in decline, and yet recently some fantastic venues have opened up, and the town hall has undergone a magnificent rehabilitation almost, not just a renovation, but they're booking some fantastic acts. My mate Mike Sanchez will be there, I think, at the end of this month, rocking the whole town, not just rocking the house or rocking the building. And some of the acts that are turning up, there's some new venues opening as well. And so it seems to be developing a nightlife, Kidderminster, which it hasn't had since I was a kid, but it isn't necessarily going to be able to do much about the day life. You have shops next door to each other in Kidderminster that are selling the same things. You have one shop that specialises in vapes and mobile phones or mobile phone accessories, and then right next door you have another shop, or maybe just over the way, you have another shop that specialises in vapes and mobile phone accessories. There was one of our top man in Manchester was on with Nick this morning talking about a street that has 40 vape shops on it. There's no way that's above board, is there? Please, as ever, you know how this programme works, correct me if I'm wrong. There's no way that's above board. You can't possibly be washing 40 faces by selling the same stuff. So something is clearly going on. We had 2 barbers on my high street in Brentford until recently, when one of them shut down, because the new one that opened is doing brilliant business. It's doing a great job. It's never empty. 50 shops in a 300-yard area we heard about on the breakfast show. So there's a lot going on here, but none of it necessarily points to easy solutions. Can Andy Burnham turn it round? Can Andy Burnham turn it round? And if so, how? 0345 60600973. And maybe if you've got some business knowledge, you can help me with this bit. You're talking about not letting... Because most high streets have got boarded up premises now, right? The other problem with this conversation, of course, is I say high street, you see a different picture from the one that I see. I say high street, what do you see? Where you are now? Do you see your hometown? Do you see the last high street you drove down? I say high street, what do you see? We don't all see the same high street. So the one with, 40, 50 vape shops in a 300-yard route, if you're seeing that high street, then Andy Burnham's words are going to be like honey to your ears, right? But if you're looking at, for example, Brentford High Street, where I live at the moment, you're thinking, well, we've only really got one vape shop, and God knows how many varieties of vape the world can sustain, but he seems to be doing okay. Why would we not want that to be there? And as I say, we've got one barber, just lost one. So it's not really speaking about my high street, unless I think back to my days in Kidderminster, and when I go and visit Kidderminster and think, oh, what a shame, this used to be such a lovely town. And now I sound like one of those bloody Facebook posts going on about drinking out of garden hoses and living off spangles. Kidderminster has an awful lot to recommend it. I love the place, and I was reminiscing on Saturday with a few fellow alumni of Kidderminster at the football in Hornchurch, and there's still a lot to recommend it, but it's not... You don't want to turn into one of those Facebook people bemoaning the past, bemoaning it, remember it, recognise it, commemorate it, but don't bemoan it. Unless you're describing a town that's had its heart ripped out by the same things that have ripped out the hearts of all the other towns, the out-of-town shopping centre and the internet. And then, if you have heard me cover this topic before, you know that at this point I routinely reference my friend Andreas, greengrocer to the stars, who used to have a greengrocer in Chiswick, where I lived at the time, and closed. And when he closed down, before reopening in glorious fashion in London's fashionable Chelsea, people were piling into the shop to commiserate about his imminent departure from our high street, at which point he would wryly note to himself that they were carrying bags full of groceries from Sainsbury's when they came in to wish him farewell, or to wish him, because you don't spend your money in the shops that possibly can buck the trends. You spend your money after looking at the prices and deciding what's cheapest. So, I mean, listen, the internet, obviously, and out-of-town shopping centres, but if they are the behemoths of this conversation, if they are the Optimus Primes of this conversation, then the other question's already been answered. If it's all down to the internet and out-of-town shopping centres, then how can he possibly turn it around? By offering something else? What does a rejuvenated high street in Britain look like? Because I really want to go there. And if it works in that town, can it work in a town 5 miles away? Or does it involve a niche that can't be replicated unless you're 50 miles away? Because otherwise you're going to be spreading what custom there is far too thinly. 0345 6060 973. I love the high street. I love shops. My early jobs, my first jobs were in shops. Something about that interaction. It's not unlike what I do now. It's customer facing. I love talking to people that I'm meeting in professional circumstances. Can Andy Burnham fix the high street? And if so, how? 0345 6060 973.
James O'Brien on LBC.
21 minutes after 10 is the time. If I left you baffled by my little introduction this morning regarding the importance of attempting to do things that are probably not going to work, or which might work but everyone else has previously given up, then Joe's been in touch with a quote from JFK. I haven't checked its provenance, Joe, so if you are sending an apocryphal quote into the ether, I'm going to blame you entirely. JFK said it, James: "We choose to go to the moon not because it is easy, but because it is hard." It's not quite the same. Andy Burnham: "We choose to resurrect the British High Street, not because it is easy, but because it is hard." But is it possible? Is it possible? 22 after 10 is the time. Mark's in Macclesfield. Mark, what do you reckon?
Morning, James.
Hello, mate.
Hiya, mate, yeah. So, James, I don't believe that Andy Burnham can save the high street with what he's proposing at the moment. My personal belief is the only way to change the high streets is people actually want high streets to be like they used to be many years ago.
Which they don't, do they?
Possibly. I mean, we've all got great stories of our childhood spending hours and hours walking around the shops.
But all of those...
town centres.
No, I know. And Mum leaving you to play by the steps at Marks and Spencer's were like a little climbing frame practically, and there'd be about 8 kids there just clambering all over it. And we had this weird thing in Kiddie called the Swan Centre that had actual swans in it with like a tiny little slide inside, and you'd climb... Anyway, I digress. All of those shops shut because we stopped shopping in them.
Pretty much. Obviously, over the last few years, we've had the explosion in companies like Amazon, where you can literally order something now and it'll be delivered the same day.
Yeah,
and unfortunately, the high street cannot compete with that. So the only way, I believe, that the high street can regenerate itself, if there was public support for that, would be for the government to impose central legislation to make it easier and cheaper for people to use the high streets. And that would, unfortunately, mean that there is a levy on any online purchases, and we actually clamp down that side of things. But I don't think that's going to get much public support, to be honest with you, James.
He's not going to do that, is he?
No, highly unlikely. So again, we're at a situation where most of the commercial retail properties on our high streets is actually owned by pension funds. I think the Duke of Westminster is one of the highest.
Well, that might be true in London. I don't think that's going to be true in Kidderminster, is it? Or Macclesfield?
Well, I think you'll be very surprised. And
really?
The reason why
they can't be getting a return on it, though, can they? If it's empty.
Well, let me explain this to you, James. If you have a book value of a property that's £1 million, for example, for a Marks and Spencer's that used to be in Kidderminster that's now closed, if you rent that out at £20,000 a year for somebody, the book value of that property drops from £1 million to £200,000. Now, are you telling me that pension companies around the world are going to accept, if you think the subprime mortgage collapse in the US in the early 2000s, if you think that was an issue, imagine the huge decimation of pension funds across the world.
How does that work? I think your field is property rather than pensions. Am I right?
Yeah.
But how does that work then? Why the pension has an asset that is not worth what the balance book says it's worth? How is that serving the pensioners?
I'm not the expert on that.
No, that's what I thought.
I'm not clued up on that, but I do know that obviously if something's overvalued and somebody then undervalues something, and that's going to cause huge...
Or someone insists on it being valued correctly, then the ramifications, as you say, take us back to 2008 when the subprime mortgage scandal exploded in the world's faces. So as long as most of the stuff you want to buy is going to be cheaper to buy online, you cannot resurrect the high street.
Well, it's cheaper and it's more accessible and it's more convenient. So those three things, unfortunately, at the moment, it's all in the favour of online shopping.
Yeah, no, you're right.
We seem to want things now. I mean, I remember years ago, James, you went to a video shop and you had to order the film in for maybe 2 or 3 weeks' time because there was only so many copies available at Blockbusters.
All roads lead to Neats at the moment. I guess we talked about Neats and how you need to know to be bored. You need to know what it is to be bored and to wait for things. And instant gratification is what you're describing. Is there anything else you could do? I mean, come back to my end of the telescope, rather than saying what he needs to do to online retailers, what could he do on the high street? Like, what about an empty premises now? Oh, yeah, if the landlord says, and if it's owned by a pension fund, and the landlord says, it's all right, you can have it for buttons, then the property comes down in value overnight.
It comes down in value overnight. But the other side of the coin as well, James, is I've got a number of businesses on the high street in tertiary locations.
What does that mean?
Because they're not on the main high street. They're in secondary.
Yeah, I could have worked that out. So just off the main drag, as it were. So what you sacrifice in footfall, you make up for in your offer.
Rent,
yes.
Yeah. So my rent on my business is £20,000 a year. The same premises, literally 100 yards down the road on the main high street where the football is, could be £80,000 a year. I choose the £20,000 a year property because that's affordable for my business. Yeah. And I've invested in that property for 15 years and ran it as a business. So from my point of view, why should someone suddenly be able to get the same rent that I'm paying in my fixed lease in the high football area and open the same business as me, as you mentioned before about the vape shops opposite each other in Kidderminster, mobile phone shops, etc.
Yeah.
Why should somebody then, another business operator who's starting off, who's not invested 15 years of time and employed 100 people in the town, why should they suddenly be allowed to rent a property at 20,000? Why shouldn't I get that offer first?
Absolutely right. I mean, why shouldn't you? And it's a rhetorical question because you flipping should, obviously. Final question. Thank you. You've kicked this off absolutely perfectly, and you've made me think of another question that's a little less serious, but I'll add it to the mix after our conversation. Are there empty shops on what you would call the primary locations in the town where you have your tertiary location?
Oh, yeah. We have
so they're actually empty shops.
Store.
Yeah, there you go.
Empty shops. Yeah. They moved out of town. They moved to a retail park, literally a mile away, where it's free parking. James. I mean, one thing that
we've lost
offer free parking.
Yeah. I mean, people always say that, and yet that would involve. I was thinking about that in Worcester Hospital on Sunday when I was visiting Mum, and it always boils my blood how much it costs to park in hospital car parks. But that money's not going to. At least as far as I'm aware, it's not going to an oligarch. The money that the parking is spent on would then have to come from another part of a budget, a council or an NHS budget. Mark, before you go, as a Macclesfield man, one thing we can all agree is that I think Origi Bianchi are in the absolute Premier League of retailers. Am I right?
Oh, you're 100%, mate. Yeah, 100%.
That's a crazy shop. I went to school with one of the current owners. Is a lovely bloke. Thank you, Mark. It is coming up to 10:30. Because if you're offering something exceptional and extraordinary, you will probably always be all right. Probably always be all right. But exceptional and extraordinary are exceptional and extraordinary words for a reason. And just for the avoidance of doubt, Gary's been in touch to remind me, Kidderminster does have a thriving Marks and Spencer's, but it's in Weaver's Wharf now, so it's out of town. And it's only just out of town. It's the same distance walk from the car park as it was when it was in the middle of town. So it's the middle of town that's broken. The town as a whole is not broken. It's just got the broken bit next to the thriving bit. And that is what Andy Burnham's problem is. Well, apart from all the things that Mark's just listed. What can I ask you this? Yeah, I think I can. Maybe what shop would work? Do you ever dream of a shop? Do you have an idea of a shop that would really, really work? I used to think, if this all goes south, or if I run out of things to say, perish the thought, I'll open a little menswear shop. But I'll get it right. I'll do something differently from what everybody else is doing. I don't know what it would have been. It was maybe specialise in formal wear, but that doesn't really hold anymore, does it? People don't wear dicky bows and dinner suits as much as they used to. I used to have a dream about just a little shop. It was going to be called O'Brien and Son, but I don't have a son, so that would be the first thing that would have to be reviewed at the time. Could you get a shop up and running? Who's done that? There you go. You see, I start with a silly question, I end up with a good one. Who started a shop recently? Give us a ring. Go give us a call and tell us what you think about Andy Burnham. And you're going to have a free advert. There's a little inducement for you, because I know how busy things are, hopefully. How do you get, as someone who has recently opened a shop on a high street, what can we learn from you? 10:31 is the time. Dominic Ellis has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
10:34 is the time. 2 days running, we are bigging up Byline Times. They do some excellent work, and they have the strapline, what the papers don't say, which is, for reasons you don't need me to explain, quite important these days. But they have got hold of, apparently, a cache of canvassing materials being used by Reform UK. And in one presentation, Reform activists are told what the biggest threat to Reform is. And I'm going to tease you with that for 10 minutes or so. What do you think Reform is telling its activists, reportedly, the biggest threat to Reform is? What's the biggest threat to Reform, according to Reform UK? And don't let me go home without telling you the answer to that question. In the meantime, high streets, you want them, you can't do, so actually I've just realised who Gary is, who sent me the message about Marks and Spencer's in Kidderminster. So Gary runs our Facebook site for Kidderminster, and he's brilliant at closing down the pointless nostalgia. You know, it's like being nostalgic for rickets or typhoid or undrinkable water. Yes, in a sepia-tinted black and white photograph, that building looks magnificent. And yes, if we could go back in time, we probably wouldn't have replaced it with the old post office or some other concrete carbuncle. But most of the time, buildings are pulled down because they are no longer fit for purpose. So the old nostalgia about, oh, those were the days when everybody had a chopper, a rally chopper, and we lived on cola cubes. That's not, it's a very popular thing on Facebook, but if, like me, you're interested in history and architecture and all the rest of it, that's not what a good Facebook past page will do. And you don't want to turn into that. So I worry that part of my nostalgia for the high street is, like Mark in Macclesfield said, born of childhood memory. So bear that in mind when you're telling me what the future looks like. Because if you did this phone-in badly, and goodness knows I know a lot about doing phone-ins badly, then you'd just be ringing in and tell me what the past looks like, right? That's quite an important point, isn't it? Don't ring me and tell me what the past looks like. Tell me what the future looks like. Mark's in Derby. Mark, what do you reckon?
Hello, long-time listener, and basically just great to speak to you. But what I really want to discuss is I grew up in Walthamstow Market, basically, and I remember being dragged up and down by my mum and my nan. I mean, it was like an 8-hour shift. Yeah. And it was heaving. It was the longest market in Europe at the time, and it was hustle and bustle. But to be honest, I'm really optimistic. We're in a point of evolution, I believe, in England and in the UK, and I feel that the high street is dying, but what will come after will be stronger and better. I taste the change in. I don't want to spend 8 hours shopping for one item. I want to go on Amazon.
You don't have to anymore. So you're doing that thing, aren't you? Although you're doing it from a slightly different angle. You're not telling me what the past looks like with a nostalgic glint in your eye. You're telling me what the past looks like with a sense of relief that it doesn't look like that anymore. But what does the future look? What does the future look like?
Well, I feel like you said, in Kidderminster, we've got more vibrant cafes. We have more vibrant nightlife. I mean, nightlife is changing. Pubs used to be the place to go, but the young are not doing that anymore.
But what about day? I'm sorry to be a blooming misery guts, but I'm thinking more about day life. I mean, I said that when I described the new venues that have opened in Kiddie and the revitalisation of the town hall, and I bet they'll be booking me next if things carry on at this rate, Mark. But that's not day life. We've still got loads of vape shops and phone shops and empty premises. And I don't know if this is peculiar, because I don't get out as much as I should, but it's the only place I've really seen a town centre full of boarded up shops that has a market market stalls on the streets outside the boarded up shops. So I mean, it's not without its charm, but it's even got a butcher's. It's not just sort of craft fairs and things like that you get in West London. I don't know that all the cafes and bars in the world can rescue the sense of decline in a town where the shops are shut and there are trestle tables and stalls parked up outside them.
Well, I live in Derby, and I don't go into Derby City Centre because they charge me like £3.50 just for 1 hour.
Yes.
So that's what deters me, not the shops. It's actually what the local authorities are doing. So if they want people to go back into the city centres, right, you need to
just roll out the red carpet. First thing you do, free parking wherever you are.
Exactly.
And the council will have to find other ways to plug the hole that's left in the budget, and that's back to just do it, like Andy Burnham has said about Andrew Harper's Killers. So what does the future look like, though? Because I'm not having nightlife, I'm talking day life. What does the day life look like in the glorious future that you were depicting when you came on the line?
So when I go back to Walthamstow and I visit, and to be honest with you, I'm actually pleasantly surprised. Now, gone are a lot of the Percy Ingles and all the old stalls and whatnot, but there's more cafes, there's more food places. I feel like the younger generation now like to go out and eat more. They like to go out and socialise, but not at nightclubs or pubs. They prefer to go to...
I'm not going to... I don't make me rain on your parade, but, that we've got a cost of living crisis at the moment, and you're talking about what are loosely luxuries rather than essentials somehow. Essentials maybe you're right, maybe it would be luxuries, but it can't all be hospitality. Hospitality is in many ways on its knees as well. But I don't want to rain on your parade, because you sounded so upbeat, didn't you, and Tiggerish when you came on at the beginning about the glorious, sound like Andy Burnham painting a picture of our glorious future, but we don't really know what it looks like, and that's got to be a problem, not just for us but for Andy Burnham as well. Thank you, Mark. Sian's in Kings Langley. Sian, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi there.
Hello.
Nice to talk to you, James. Basically, I opened my business. I own a shop on a small village high street in October 23.
Yes.
And it's interesting listening to you talk about, is the high street dead? Like, I guess it's the definition of the high street. For me, where I am, I'm in a small village high street,
right,
and our high street is thriving, and I work really hard for my shop to do well. But my local town high street is the complete opposite. So it's I think it's really a focus on what the definition of the high street is. And I just heard you talking to your last caller about essentials versus non-essentials.
Luxuries.
And absolutely. I guess I'm classed as I am classed as a non-essential shop. I do simple living, lifestyle products, for people who want to come to a shop. They want to browse, they want to interact with a vibe of a place.
So what, like decor and things like that?
So I do, I guess, home and garden and lifestyle stuff. So
lovely.
I sell lovely candles and beautiful journals and pots for your garden, and
I love shops like yours.
Thank you.
Just have a little pooch around and come up with something you didn't know you needed. Didn't even know you wanted it, let alone needed it.
Absolutely. And I have a lot of people who come because we have other places in the village that are an upholstery shop, or, there's a small art gallery here. We have a great clothes shop, a butcher's.
So this is quite idyllic, and this is what I meant when I said, I don't know if you heard, I said, I say high street, you close your eyes, what do you see? And if you're seeing what you describe, if you're seeing the high street where your shop is, then you're not who Andy Burnham is talking about, are you?
Right.
But
and I think this is why I called in, because this is the idea of people's,
but do you think that can be replicated? Obviously not the same shops necessarily, but can that be replicated? Could they turn around? Is the local town Kings Langley?
Yes.
So
so I'm in Kings Langley, close. Watford is the biggest town.
Watford. Could they turn around Watford?
Well, the hilarious thing is I rarely go into Watford myself.
Well, there you go. What would tempt you in? What would tempt you into Watford?
If I'm honest,
owning
a shop, I don't ever want to go to any other shops.
No, fair enough. So it puts you in a slightly peculiar position, doesn't it?
I'm not the greatest kind of person to kind of have a good and broad view of it. All I know is that I think I am lucky, and I think places like me are lucky that the local people are they want to keep the high street thriving. They want high street.
It's more than just the community. I've worked out what your shop is called. You didn't spend ages coming up with the first bit of the title, did you?
No.
Can I tell people what it's called?
Please.
It's called Home and Garden by Sian.
Absolutely.
That's Sian's shop. Did you nearly call it Sian's shop by any chance?
No, I didn't. But my predecessor was actually named the shop. So all my socials and all the people know the village the shop as the Little Shop of Happiness.
Well, it is a little shop of happiness, and
bless you.
And that is, I mean, both the point and the opposite of the point, isn't it? Because that works, and it works in a beautiful little Hertfordshire village like Kings Langley. But it would be absolutely no use whatsoever if we were trying to advise Andy Burnham on revitalising Watford High Street. So there's something in that, though. A niche stroke destination, I think, works small. I mean, Kidderminster and Brentford are the towns, the high streets I see. When you say high street, I see Kidderminster and Brentford. Brentford is absolutely bonkers at the moment. Complete turnaround. Not to the eternal joy, necessarily, of people whose families have been in the area for years, but dockside facilities that have been empty for decades have been torn down and turned into fancy flats, and with the fancy flats come new businesses. It's quite weird, though, because on the other side of the high street, where the development hasn't taken place, you've still got like a cost cutter and a vape shop and a barber's. I think Brentford is getting it pretty close to perfect at the moment, but we've got empty premises as well. We could probably support a shop like Sian's, but we haven't got a butcher's. So what's Andy Burnham actually talking about, do you think, when he says that the decline of the high street will not be permitted to continue for too long? Westminster has stood by while our high streets declined. That ends now. So we've spoken to a shopkeeper. What about the nearly shopkeeper? What about, you can tell I'm in a good mood, can't you? Because I'm setting new challenges for my switchboard every section of the programme. So you looked into opening a shop. You thought about opening a shop. You wanted to open a shop. And you didn't open a shop. Why not? What could perhaps be on Andy Burnham's to-do list that would have made you more likely to get the shutters up, more likely to open the door? If you hit the numbers now, you will get through. 0345 6060 973. Of course, the love for Watford is coming in now. Wayne tells me it's got new restaurants, large brands, a cinema, a new food court. It's perfect for a quick escape to London or the commuter belt as well. So maybe it was wrong to lump Watford in with other towns, the towns that Andy Burnham's talking about. So that's ask number one. If you're waiting to talk to me, don't worry, we'll be able to squeeze you in as well, I hope. But ask number one is, you didn't open a shop because ... Is that ... something that can be undone? And ask number two, you know he's talking about your town. Vape shops, betting shops, dodgy businesses. He's bitten off a little bit more than he can chew by going after the betting shops. I'll tell you that for nothing. They have an incredibly well-organised and well-funded lobbying machine behind them. But some people would add Turkish barbers or Kurdish barbers to that list. Vape shops, betting shops, dodgy businesses. If that's your town, I mean, the question I really want to ask you is whether or not you would prefer them to be shuttered. You'd prefer them to be empty. But if that's your town that Andy Burnham is talking about, do you think he can turn this around? And if so, how? It is 10:46. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC.
James O'Brien on LBC.
10:49 is the time. And, of course, I mean, on my sort of bus routes and beyond, that some of the areas of London suburbs, the outer reaches of London that are thriving, often have quite a hefty ethnic slant. You know, you'll be looking at supermarkets where people have a relationship with the owners. Ealing, Southall, I was in Southall at the weekend. Different. I mean, that's a very community-based offer. So you have shops and restaurants that are appealing to needs that can't be translated out of those communities into different ones. You know, for example, a shop selling saris is not going to do very well in an area where there aren't any people who want to buy saris. So there are niche, for want of a better word, or specific offers you can make that will work, that will thrive in certain areas. But Andy Burnham is setting himself a much bigger target than that. He wants to make it a national issue. The more I think about it, the more I wonder if it actually is. Anne's been in touch to say he's talking about Makerfield. I don't know whether that is Anne in Makerfield, who this year has become one of my favourite callers, but It could be. And if he's talking about Makerfield, that kind of proves my point. Is that a town where the high street is dominated by vape shops, betting shops and dodgy businesses? And if so, what's the alternative? What's going to be there instead? Is nothing better than something? Alec is in Manchester. Alec, what can you tell us?
Yeah, sorry, I'm a little bit under the weather.
What did you just say? Do you know what I just heard?
Oh, a bit of a blur, sorry.
I just heard, which is great, but I thought one of us has got a problem here. I hope it's not me. Carry on, let's start again.
I'll try and slow down. He's already done it. Stockport. It wasn't looking a bit... Sorry, I've got a crying baby. It was falling apart. Like, it'd been renovated about 10 or 15 years ago, I think.
Yeah.
And he has done a £5 million renovation as his time as mayor. It's brilliant. It's honestly one of the best bits of High Street you'll ever see. It's got unique restaurants. It's got florists. It's just really... I've never seen anywhere like it. And it's Stockport. It's exactly the greatest place in the world.
No.
But it's bloody lovely now. It's really becoming... It is honestly amazing.
I mean, I'm raining on parades a bit this morning, and I don't intend to, and I don't really want to. But could that be repeated nearby? Because do you see what I mean? I'm thinking that Stockport has been turned around, and in fact, it's even reached Reuters. It's been written about by Reuters, and it is often cited. It was the Stockport Mayoral Development Corporation, wasn't it, using public capital to unlock private investment. So to give the fella his dues, he's got a plan, he's got an idea, and Stockport would be a wonderful example. Population of 300,000, new homes, as you say, new businesses, all sorts of things. But could you do that up the road as well?
I hate to come in with the optimism, but I think we've finally got a politician who does what he says and has done what he said. Yeah. I do think he can. Yeah.
And that is why, because it is that thing. I don't know if you were listening at the top of the show or if you were dealing with the baby. You sound, Alec, don't take this the wrong way, you sound shattered, mate. Was it a tough night? Was it a tough night with the little one?
No, I've got to, but no.
Good.
Losing my voice a bit.
That'll be it then. That'll be it then.
Back.
But at the very top of the show, I was saying is that maybe you just need someone to come along and break away from the idea of, oh, well, that can't be done. Even if they're doing it regretfully, they're doing it with not with a shrug, but with a sigh. They go, I can't do that. It can't be done. And you're like you say, he's done it in Stockport. Why shouldn't he be able to do it elsewhere? In which case, the answer to the question that I'm asking is probably a little bit more complicated than we can account for this morning. What are you going to do? Well, you're going to use public investment to bring in private or public money to bring in private investment, which takes us slightly back to Mark in Macclesfield. From Alec in Manchester to Mark in Macclesfield, all we need is Anne in Makerfield, and we've got the hat-trick this morning. And it's a thing that my friend Scott picks up on. He's a shopkeeper, and he says, picking up on Mark in Macclesfield's point, it's not fair. It's simply not fair when new shops get massively reduced rent to tempt them into the area. What are we? What are we, old shops? Chopped liver? So you'd have to deal with that somehow as well. There was one I saw recently in Ealing, and there was a privately run small organic supermarket. Don't laugh. I know I'm a walking cliche. I didn't go there. And then one of the chains opened on the other side of the road. So that's targeted, right? There's no way they're both going to survive. So, if you're trying to tempt in a big business, you're probably running the risk of squeezing out a small one. But we should all go to Stockport for the weekend. Does anyone want to come? Should we all get a charabanc to Stockport for the weekend, have a look at what's gone on up there and see whether or not it can be replicated elsewhere in the country? Liz is in Shepperton. Liz, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi there.
Hello,
first of all, hello. Shepperton is amazing. The High Street, I absolutely love living here, purely because we have such a wonderful little variety of... We've still got a post office, we've got butchers, we've got a new wool shop that's open that's really specific, for... Yeah. But I've always... Every now and again, the council comes along and says, well, we've got free parking up to 3 hours in our town, that you can just pull in, nip into the butchers, off you go. And people come to our village because of that, because they know they can just go in. The next town along, there isn't any free parking at all. So it's a bigger town, and you have to go into the multi-storey, and you have to pay your £3 an hour. It's just gone up, actually, quite a lot. And I think people know they can bypass that and go straight to the big Tesco's or Sainsbury's superstores with free parking outside and just go in and get most of what they want, or they buy online. So I think we need to encourage people to come in for things that they can't buy online, to get their nails done. All right, hairdressers, nail bars, people complain about them. We've got,
I think in Brentford, I've got 2 or 3 nail bars. It's not necessarily something on my mental map of the town, to be honest with you, although I do enjoy the odd manicure, Liz, between you and me. But, I mean, yeah, so services then become... a replacement for
that you have to come in for. You cannot go online. The other problem with the big town that's just down the road from me is that all people used to go in because of all the restaurants and the takeaways. They used to walk past the other shops and get the takeaway. Now it's a wall-to-wall mopeds with the guys delivering.
Oh yeah, of course.
Which means that there isn't a footfall anymore of people walking past, and they're not going to pay £3 an hour to walk down and go to, I don't know, maybe WH Smith or TK, whatever it's called
Maxx.
now.
TK Maxx?
No, it's not called TK Maxx. It's called TG Jones.
Oh, TJ Hughes. TJ Jones, the old W Smiths, WH Smith. Yes. I think they're on their uppers.
I don't think they're going to... That's the point. I don't think people are going to pay money. They're going to go perhaps to a big superstore where they can ease. It's all about ease.
Can you rescue a big town with wool shop? I'm being glib, but things like wool shops and cafes and nail bars and services and hair salons. Can you do that? Can you completely change the focus of it and make a long list of all the things you can't buy online or get online? Start with services, move on to cooked food, but then you've reminded us even that can involve deliveries, which doesn't really help the high street at all. Can it be done? Can it be done?
I think if you can, with a bit of forethought, I think giving a couple of hours free parking it would be a start. Everybody gets 2 hours. They can come in and do their little bits. Plus, the people in the next town, the lady who organises everything, she's almost the sort of guru of it all. She started to organise events in the main town square where she puts on music and puts out deck chairs and then has little artisan markets.
That's happening in Kiddie as well. Kidderminster's doing that as well. So actually, part of the answer that's emerging in the course of this hour is that you need to be the change you want to see, at risk of going fully Californian. You need people in the community who want to improve the community, and it's manna from heaven for them to have a Prime Minister recognising that it's possible, albeit that it's going to be a heck of a lot more complicated than a single tweet allows. Liz, lovely stuff, thank you. And back to Derby. Blake is there. Blake, what would you like to say?
I was thinking about experiences.
Yes.
So in Manchester and Leeds, there's these arcades where you just pay to go in, and some of them are 4 floors tall.
Yeah.
And it's just arcade machines from the 70s, 80s, 90s, all the way up to now.
There's one in Soho, actually, although it's not that size. And I saw one in Worcester at the weekend, which I thought, crikey, I wish I wasn't busy. I'd love to lose a couple of hours in there.
We've taken the kids a few times, and they are a real draw to the towns that you go to. There's one just opened in Derby. And when my son saw it, he ran in to tell me about it.
That's nice. That's a good thing, right? And does that, so replacement things that we didn't have in the past, although we had arcades, didn't we? This is almost a sort of nostalgic arcade by the sounds of it.
It is, but it's an experience that the kids can't get anywhere else. There's nothing else that's actually drawing people to towns because everyone's broke now.
That's true. Not everyone.
So
obviously,
retail therapy. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it is about buying stuff for fun. Is not really for many people. So we've got the lovely lady in Kings Langley, where she has a shop that you go to buy stuff for fun, to buy lovely stuff because you can and you want it. But that's not going to rescue a high street like Derby's. Derby's is going to have to draw people in very, very differently.
And I love shops like that one that the lady was speaking about. But a lot of them are being replaced with stuff that people are buying from Temu.
Yeah, you need to watch that as well. You won't get the quality on Temu. And speaking of Temu, our own Temu Trump, Nigel Farage, I did promise to reveal to you what they have told their own activists in Reform UK is the biggest threat to success for Reform UK. The fact is, they wrote in a canvassing material seen by Byline Times, the biggest threat to reform is... It's not the Tories, it's not Labour. The establishment is going to throw everything at us, and the biggest threat to reform is... How long have we got, Keith? 10 seconds. Can I string that one out, do you think? Shall I just do it again, shall I? Come back round again, shall I? Yes? OK, ready? Yes? The biggest threat to reform is... I'll tell you after the news.
James O'Brien on LBC.
4 minutes after 11 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Quite a few suggestions, all variations on a similar theme, and some left field ones as well. But the biggest threat to Reform UK, according to canvassing material seen by Byline Times, is the training videos and a cache of canvassing material. They not only advise party canvassers to ignore no junk mail signs and leaflet the houses anyway, and to avoid wearing any party branding whilst doing so in order to make the activists unidentifiable. But also, the fact is, the biggest threat to reform is people in it and itself. It's not the Tories, it's not Labour. The establishment is going to throw everything at us. The biggest chance of things going wrong is stuff like infighting, stuff like people just saying and doing stupid stuff. That's our biggest risk. They also advise people, which is, to be fair, advice that everybody should take, not to drink and tweet. Because, as I say, the biggest threat to reform is the people in it. And that is reported in Byline Times this morning. Let's stay with Andy Burnham. And staying with that theme, I like this theme. It could all end horribly, but you would be able to say, well, at least he tried. And I know a lot of people feel that Keir Starmer has been abominably treated, even by Labour voters. But I can't really expend much more energy acknowledging your pain, because it's not very relevant anymore to the bigger picture. And yes, some of the things Andy Burnham has announced and been applauded for were already coming down the slipway. We're already on the schedule. But them's the breaks. That's the way it goes. You know, that was the old days. This is the new days. And the thing I was trying to articulate at the top of the show, that idea of, because the 5 people in front of you have had a look at something and decided nothing can be done, you conclude that nothing can be done. Andy Burnham is not doing that. And at the moment, it feels very refreshing. It may end up feeling ridiculous, but at the moment, it's feeling very refreshing. He is looking at the high street and decades of decline and thinking, no, we can turn things around. And thanks to our caller from Manchester, we know that, in fact, he has put his money where his mouth is, or put our money where his mouth, put your money where his mouth is, and done it in at Stockport. And then we come to Andrew Harper's killers, who previous prime ministers, two or three previous prime ministers, it's so hard to keep up, have looked at, and justice secretaries and attorney generals and the rest of it, they have looked at it and they have said nothing can be done. And I think that the role that a pundit, a gob on a stick like me plays in this process is sometimes unhelpful. You can do things in 2 ways, can't you? I've never thought of this before. So on the one hand, you can erroneously and quite dishonestly pretend that a problem is easy to fix. So you can sit here talking about, for example, small boats or big boats, as I presume we're going to have to start calling them soon. And I could invite you to ring in with your solutions. And respectfully, your solutions will be either ridiculous or illegal, and usually very cruel. And I can sort of stroke my chin and go, I hadn't thought of that. And I'd be lying to you, and you wouldn't be lying to me. I'd be lying to you, and we'd all be pretending that this was feasible. But the corollary of that, if that's the right word to use, would be to think, well, if it was possible to fix it, they would have fixed it by now. I probably found myself slipping into that route with regard to channel crossings, and then lo and behold, they managed to reduce them by 44% year on year. So it's possible that things can be done, that there are solutions to a problem. But a lot of things that haven't been done, politicians haven't done it. You look at and you think, well, if it was possible to do it, then they would have done, because they'd be daft not to, right? Do you see what I mean? You just look at a problem and you can either turn it into a lazy... Unfortunately, some politicians these days seem to think that politics is a lazy... send all the prisoners to El Salvador. That's exactly what a caller to LBC might have said 5 years ago, and it is, unfortunately, utterly unworkable. But that, of course, doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. The choice you have, and I've never noticed the negative side to this before, the choice you have when presented with a really difficult problem, or the choice we sometimes make when presented with a really difficult problem, is either to pretend that there are simple solutions or to conclude honestly that there aren't any. Because if there were a solution to this problem, then all the other people would have implemented it, because you've all had a crack at it. You've all had a go at it. It's a bit how to stay with the boats for a moment. It's why you end up with these ridiculous scenarios where people like Honest Bob Jenrick and Suella Braverman leave the party that presided over an explosion of channel crossings, not just presided over, but whose policies caused an explosion in channel crossings, and they hold roles like Home Secretary or Immigration Minister, and then they hop over to a new party and start gnashing their teeth and clutching their pearls about it. I mean, it's palpably absurd. But if you're in the business of not being able to deliver a meaningful solution when you have power, what choice have you got when you've not got power than to pretend that it's actually really easy to solve? Just please don't mention the fact that I didn't solve it. So those are the two camps that you have when presented with a political problem. People with power who haven't fixed it, and therefore lead or tempt some of us to conclude that it's unfixable, and those who don't have power who pretend that it's easy, which is probably something that politicians should leave to phone-in hosts. Let us pretend that all these things, or let our callers pretend things have got nice and easy solutions, and we can either wave you through without any challenge, or we can tear you to shreds live on the radio. But politicians pretending that there are easy solutions to complicated problems, history has taught us, are very, very dangerous. Let's send all the prisoners to El Salvador. Which brings us to Andrew Harper and this curious dissonance again between what we want him to do, Andy Burnham in this case, and what he can do. So it's hard to think of a better example. I don't know why I brought small boats into it, never mind big boats, because it's hard to think of a better example. Your Prime Minister, there's two people in jail, right, who should be staying in jail. Pretty much everybody thinks so, if you see the case in complete isolation. But they're coming out of jail because the system demands it. Andy Burnham comes along and says, no, that's not going to happen. He's actually gone further. That's why I paused there. I was just handed... That's not why I paused. But he said this morning he does not want a single prisoner released early, and he's very keen to address public concern over the issues. In Derbyshire on a visit, the Prime Minister said, I don't want to see a single prisoner released early, and that's the spirit that I've brought into the first 3 weeks that I've served as Prime Minister, and I've always worked like that. I've never taken no for an answer. I'm turning into him now, so let me rephrase that. I've never taken no for an answer. Not in the past, dealing with Hillsborough and other issues, and not now when I'm facing the situation that I'm looking at now. It's always been my style. I won't give up, and I believe there is more I can do. It's my job to speak up for the public on this issue. I take that duty very seriously. I don't know why I'm reading this out. We could have played his voice, couldn't we? We could have actually had the authentic voice of Andy Burnham reading out this instead of my middle-class costive tones. I take that duty very seriously indeed, and I'm confident that there's more that can be done and will be done to address public concerns. So it's the perfect example of what I'm talking about. I look at it, regardless of who's in charge, actually, and think, well, if the Attorney General says it can't be done, I don't care what colour scarf the Attorney General is wearing. If a Conservative Attorney General says it can't be done and we change government, I still think it can't be done, because why would the Attorney General lie? It's not necessarily a question of lying. It's a question of not digging deep enough or not shrugging. Do you see what I mean? I'm desperate now to knit together these two theories, the theory of the shrug and the theory of the simple solution to a complicated problem. He is essentially saying, I don't care who has concluded that it can't be done. I am Prime Minister. And like Jean-Luc Picard on the bridge of the USS Enterprise, he is simply saying to his Justice Secretary, make it so. Make it so. Make it so that Andrew Harper's killers stay in jail, even though, as I understand it, the current legal frameworks make it, well, Downing Street themselves said impossible yesterday. How do you police this? How do you walk this tightrope as an observer, as a punter, as a voter, never mind as a pundit? Yesterday, Downing Street said it was impossible. The spokesman, a Downing Street spokesman, yesterday said it was impossible. Today, Andy Burnham is saying, you've got to do it. You've got to find a solution. You've got to keep these two particular criminals in jail because the crime that they committed has, well, I think it's fair to say that the crime they have committed has engendered such strong public opinion and media pressure that you're going to have to keep these killers in jail. And he has indeed announced himself overnight confident of success. So there's part of you that loves this, right? Flipping out. Here's a Prime Minister who's been told by, and then insert your sort of pet peeve, the men in grey, the suits, the blob, the woke majority. The Prime Minister has been told by the, quotes, experts, end quotes, that it can't be done. And he has said, I'm not taking that. I'm not accepting that. Do it. Make it so. He's told his Justice Secretary to draw up plans to prevent the early release of PC Andrew Harper's killers. And he has told them to present those plans to Parliament at the first opportunity. He's even announced himself increasingly confident that a solution could be found. And here's the bit, despite stark warnings from officials that it would be impossible to prevent the release of these two men, who I don't particularly want to name, not least because every time I see their names, I see the pictures of them grinning at their friends as they were being taken down from the dock, having been found guilty of PC Harper's manslaughter. He said, Burnham, that he's never accepted that he must choose between releasing perpetrators of rape, grooming and the killers of police officers, as in you can release one of them but you can't release the other. The new Justice Secretary, whose name you could be forgiven for not having on speed dial yet, Alex Norris, has been told to find a solution before Parliament returns next month. So, 0345 6060973. What are you going to think if this works? I would now be very surprised if it didn't. But Andy Burnham is doing things differently. He is doing things differently. Which makes me think this will now work. If you were using the old rules of politics here, you would be saying things like, he's expended too much political capital, he's shown too much ankle, he's written his name now on the release being prevented, there's no way it can't happen. You wouldn't necessarily want to be Alex Norris, you wouldn't necessarily want to be the Justice Secretary charged with delivering what was yesterday, according to Downing Street, impossible. Actually, just think about that. Can you do this, please? Hang on, who are you? Oh, I'm from Downing Street. The same Downing Street that said it was impossible yesterday? Yeah. That's us, mate. What's your problem? Well, you're asking me to do something today, on Tuesday, that you said was impossible on Monday. This sounds like a James O'Brien monologue. There's no earthly way that we can do on Tuesday something that we said was impossible. Sorry, pal, that's your job. You've got to do it. Give me a ring when it's sorted. See you in Parliament at the end of recess to announce it. But what are you going to think if this happens? What are you going to think? Okay? 0345 6060973. I don't know that this is healthy. I said to you last week, if I was Prime Minister, I'd just keep them in jail. I'd do whatever needs to be done to keep them in jail because it's a massive PR win. And then I said to you, thank goodness I'm not Prime Minister, because the Prime Minister should not be in the business of pursuing PR wins without being properly mindful of the consequences. Without being properly mindful of the consequences. And the consequences are, as I understand it, that you could have an avalanche of cases being brought saying that we are being discriminated against, or that we should be treated differently as well. Victims in particular coming forward to say, how can you be releasing the person who killed my dad when you didn't release the person who killed Andrew Harper? I'm not a lawyer. There will be lawyers listening. I don't know how qualified they will be to provide definitive. There's no such thing as definitive advice. That's why we have judges. You have two lawyers arguing with each other and then a judge takes a view. But if you had a different judge, you might have ended up with a different view. There's three moving parts here, for me at least. The first is why Andy Burnham is doing it. The second is whether or not it is going to succeed, to which I think the answer is now, yeah, probably. And the third is, the bit I'm most interested in, what are you going to think if it does happen? Is it going to make you think better of Andy Burnham? I don't think it's going to make anyone think worse of him. So, if this happens, what does it do to to your attitude to Andy Burnham, if he pulls this off, as it were. Also, a couple of you have pointed out that there's no way Downing Street, or you're suggesting there's no way Downing Street would have said yesterday that it's impossible without checking with him first. So they've kind of played us a bit, maybe. Say it's impossible, and then I'll come out tomorrow and say that we're going to do it. And that is, again, pursuing a big PR victory. So let's say he does it. He somehow finds a way, Alex Norris somehow finds a way to keep these particular killers, these two prisoners serving 13 years each for manslaughter in jail, but can't change the rules for all the other people currently serving sentences for the same offence. Yeah, all right. I mean, goodness knows I go on a bit. What will you think? All right? What will you think if this happens? 0345 6060 973. So, in a way, what do you think now? And what will you think if he actually succeeds in delivering what many people have been simultaneously calling for quite loudly while believing it to be impossible? Because if it was possible, why didn't Keir Starmer's government do it? Why didn't Rishi Sunak's government do it? Short answer, because they weren't due to be released on their watch, but they could have changed the rules to make sure that they never would have been. So I just want to know what you're going to think of this story, of this event, if Andy Burnham manages to deliver it. It's 11:20.
James O'Brien on LBC.
22 minutes after 11 is the time. I think that what I'm trying to articulate is the idea that a Prime Minister is supposed to do unpopular things because he has to. So you're putting it better than I am. This is from Nick. Burnham is in danger of allowing the pendulum of popularity versus policy to swing too far in the other direction as an overcompensatory reaction to Starmer. David similarly says, the newspapers smell blood. If they can force Andy Burnham to change the law now, they will make his life hell. You're looking at justice by newspaper headlines. And I kind of want you to tell me whether you agree with that, or whether this issue can be ring-fenced in a way that means it can be almost unique, it can be specific. In a way, I want you to ring me and tell me something that I'm not prepared to say on the radio myself, but because I don't mean it. Give me a ring and tell me why they shouldn't be released early. That maybe is the best way into the question of why what Andy Burnham's doing is potentially problematic while also being, in the short term, incredibly popular. 0345 6060 973. Give me a ring and tell me why they shouldn't be released early. Because I think it's important to hear those arguments and to hear those voices in a media environment that has gone a little bit, understandably, because it's such a horrible crime and such an emotive murder, manslaughter. It's important to remember why yesterday it was impossible. John's in Manchester. Oh, it's a very northwest heavy show today, John, and I'm here for it. What would you like to say?
This is about political will, as it always is.
Is it?
And just on your point about the Attorney General, you made a point about the Attorney General there before. You said, why would he lie? This is not. It would not be the first time that an Attorney General or any other type politician has lied. The Attorney General lied in 2003 when he lied us into a war, when he said it was legal. So this is. I think that's still. This is what I say. It's about political will.
It's still debatable, though, isn't it? That Lord Goldsmith initially. Oh, crikey, you're making me swat up now on stuff I can't remember. It was Lord Goldsmith.
Let's move to the point about political will.
Yeah, but just let me just clarify that I don't think that's a statement you can make with your full chest. I think it would be disputed.
I dare to do that. I would dare to do that.
No, I know, but you're not going to get sued for libel by Lord Goldsmith. I am. So it is not the case that he concedes or believes that he lied about that. And in answer to the question of why would an Attorney General do it, the answer would be because enormous pressure was being brought to bear upon him by a Prime Minister who was desperate to go to war with George W. Bush. So it's a different but similar story, and I just wanted to clarify those two things. Now, fill your boots.
Now, political will, and I'm not a great fan of any politician in particular, but Andy Burnham, to be fair to him, has shown political will in the past. In 2009, he was told to shut the schools or 60,000 people would die from swine flu. He didn't. He showed political will. He didn't shut the schools. He didn't close down society. 60,000 people did not die. And I think we need to do this. Politicians need to be brave enough to do this more often. question experts. Experts like the Attorney General who throws his arms up and says, oh, this can't be done.
Yeah.
It can be done if you have the political will.
And he does. But is it a political will or is it a populist will?
Is it a will that people want dangerous criminals who have killed enforcers of the law in prison? I think the population.
Well, they are in
all the names you want.
No, but
James.
they are in prison.
They are. They want, and we want them.
And they will get out at some point.
They will, but the longer they're in there, the better for society.
Or the better for public opinion.
What's public opinion? Is it better for society, James, that dangerous criminals who have killed law enforcers are in prison for as long as they should be?
Well, is it better for society that they stay there when they are adjudged to no longer be dangerous?
Who makes that judgment?
Well, the authorities,
the
people that you're saying political will should overcome.
Well, has that judgment been?
So you're responding to my points too. Hang on, you're responding. Just stop for a minute.
Crime, James.
You're talking too quickly. I'm struggling to keep up with you, but I don't want you to gloss over the point I just made, because you asked me who makes that decision. And that's the point, isn't it? It will be parole officers and probation officers. No, you have to let me finish, John. You're too quick for me. You have to let me finish. You're too quick for me, all right?
Okay.
Because you asked me that question, and I'm not sure that you're listening to my answer. I'm not sure that political will should be a card that trumps the system or the parole office. I certainly don't think public opinion should be something that trumps the parole officers, the prison system, the justice framework. No, hang on, you're talking too quickly again. You can't possibly have taken on board what I've just said, because I haven't yet.
Go on.
So do you see, you're essentially saying political will should overcome the rule of law?
No, I'm not.
You are.
No, I'm not. Because these people were assigned a specific sentence, and now they're being let out early.
Well, then nobody can be let out early.
I'm sorry?
Then nobody can be let out early.
Are they being let out before their sentence has expired?
Yes, everybody is.
What sentence were they given?
Everybody is.
What sentence were they given, and are they being let out early?
Yes, 14 years, and yes, but everybody is being let out early. Everyone convicted of similar crimes.
Everybody shouldn't be let out early, James.
But that's why the question is about these two, not about everybody, mate. Come on, this should be clear to you. It's not a question about whether we approve of early release schemes. Unfortunately, for the very simple reason that you can't fill a bucket twice, we've got no choice to let out prisoners before their sentences are over. No, we don't, because the alternative is to send people who got convicted today somewhere other than prison. So let's focus on the case in hand, because I think it may be my fault you've misunderstood the question.
No, I haven't misunderstood the question.
Well, what's the question then?
The question was, should we let them out early?
These two?
Yes.
And all the others
should stay in prison. And what you need is somebody with political will. So should you
treat these two differently from everybody else?
I don't. On that point, I don't care. I don't care about the minutiae.
You have to. That's the phone-in
of this, James. What I'm saying to you is, I want a politician in there with the political will to keep all of them in. Every one of them.
Okay.
Not just
so that's not the phone-in that we're having, though, is it?
If he's going to cherry-pick
yes.
two people who have killed law enforcers,
yes.
then I'd say I'll take that deal. I'll take that deal for now. But I would want a politician in there with the political will to keep all of them in.
Well, that's not going to happen unless we build like 10 new prisons.
Well, that's very sad, isn't it, James? That's very sad, and it shows the weakness of the system, doesn't it?
Well,
and it shows the anti-democratic will of the people is not being, the democratic will of the people is not being adhered to. And that's not good, is it, James?
Well, the early release scheme is a consequence, as you probably know, of a decade and a half of failure to, well, A, run the justice system efficiently, and B, have enough prison places for right-wing policies that think that locking...
I tell you what,
you can't let me finish a single sentence. This must be what it feels like to ring me normally. It's supposed to be the other way around. Where are all the texts attacking John for talking over people and sounding like... So there's a fascinating piece in The Observer at the weekend about what they've done in Scandinavia and the reoffending rate. Because if you are genuinely interested in what's best for society, the reoffending rate and the rehabilitation successes are off the charts. I disagree with you about what's best for society. What's best for society is to take a huge number of prisoners prisoners who are either illiterate or neurodiverse or who have been come from poor, deprived backgrounds and turn them into people that aren't going to reoffend again. That's the best thing. Otherwise, we keep everybody locked up. The prisons get bigger and bigger and bigger, and eventually the whole country sinks under the weight of the metal doors that you'd need to keep them all banged up. So I do disagree with you fundamentally about that. And you can't make up your own phone-in. Only I'm allowed to do that. And this phone-in is about whether or not Andy Burnham should, to use your phrase, put the political will or the public opinion card on the table and trump the whole system. You can't respond to that by saying, well, I don't like the system, because he's not ripping up the system. He is saying, here's a card that overplays. It's like I'm putting down a joker and none of these other cards count anymore. And that, I don't think, is something that we should be so casual about.
But, James, if this is the thin end of the wedge...
Oh, don't use that phrase, John.
The system, if this is the thin end of the wedge that will correct the system in the right direction, I'm all for it.
And rehabilitation be damned?
Rehabilitation.
Reoffending rates be damned? And thin end of the wedge, it's normally a bit of a red flag, that phrase. But anyway, I hear you. So you'd come out of this thinking that Andy Burnham... Oh, it's quite a long conversation, that, John, and I'm not entirely sure that I can neatly précis what you're going to come out of this thinking about Andy Burnham. It'd be good if he did it, but he should have done a lot more anyway. And everyone who's currently set to be released from prison early, which is everyone, and they were released from prison early long before the early release scheme came in. The sentence that you're handed in a court is never the sentence that you are actually required to serve unless you misbehave in prison. So I don't know. I mean, maybe that is populism 101. Here's Dominic Ellis with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
This is the story of the week, I think. Andy Burnham's determination to prevent the early release of Andrew Harper, PC Andrew Harper's killers. He's vowed while we've been on air to keep close to the family. There's also reports. It's a bit tricky sometimes when it says breaking news on the screen, because it may not be breaking at all. They just stick that up there to draw our eyes. But I've heard the suggestion that women's prisons could be repurposed pretty quickly to accommodate men, which means women who have committed crimes would walk free, while men are convicted of the same crimes would not, presumably. That's another phone in. At least he's keeping us busy. And then No Hostages poses a question that I don't think I've asked you yet. And he poses it very powerfully. Does your caller, I think, referencing John in Manchester, think that that people who kill police officers should be treated more harshly than someone who killed a nurse or a teacher, your granny, or a child? And I don't think that's a rhetorical question. Because here's a text picking up on it. They should not allow people convicted of killing emergency workers, whether it's murder or manslaughter, to have any discount on their sentences. This is the view, I believe, of the huge majority of the country. I mean, I can't count the huge majority of the country, but I think I can live with a different tariff for people who've killed emergency workers or public servants. I mean, I might struggle to make a conclusive or definitive list, but people who risk their lives to protect ours, if you kill one of them, you get an even more big punishment than you do if you kill me. I don't really want to think of any other family members in that category when we're talking about being killed, but I mean, is there a reason why? Is there a reason why you wouldn't think that? If your job is to run towards danger when I'm in danger or possibly running away from it, and you get killed in the line of duty, is it so unreasonable, this law? I think it was Rishi Sunak's government that introduced it. I don't know that it is. So it's No Hostages, one of my favourite correspondents, has sent that question in. I don't think it's meant to be rhetorical. Why would we not want to live in a society where people who kill police officers get treated more harshly than people who kill nurses, teachers, your granny or a child? I don't know. It's a question we can add to the list. 0345 60 60973. Although, where does it stop? Do you extend it to all key workers? You know, all of the people that we were banging saucepans for during COVID, they go above and beyond. So any job that involves a genuine slice of patriotism. Do you get a greater tariff for killing a politician than you do for killing a pub landlord or a milkman? I don't know. That would be a fairly difficult one to sell because, unfortunately, we live in an age, whether rightly or wrongly, most people don't think that politicians are necessarily people performing patriotic duties. I don't know about this, actually. And if I'd lost a loved one who wasn't a police officer, actually, that's the call I want, isn't it? Someone is currently serving a sentence for killing someone you love who's not a police officer. What do you think? Do you think that Andrew Harper's killers should serve longer sentences than your loved one's killers? I'd be surprised if I've got that listener. Or at least if you are listening, that you would feel comfortable calling in to tell me what you think. But and you're only one view. There'll be two people in that position who've got different opinions. But that's the key question, isn't it? If your mum had been killed, or your dad, or your husband, let's say, had been killed, either at work or not, by a horrible person or persons, and they're due for early release, I think you'd probably just take the win, wouldn't you, and say, well, it's better that one person's killers stay in, even if my loved one's killers don't. I don't know, though, because it's systemic, this. Andy Burnham's going to make an exception for him, but not for you. Nick's in Dudley. Nick, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I don't think Andy can get involved in this. I don't think he should. I think you have to have a clear separation between politics and the judiciary. And what you have to recognise as well is that this law for emergency workers was brought in after this offence.
Yes, I know. Well, it's called Harper's Law, isn't it? I think it's his law in a way.
So you can't retrospectively punish them for... I've got no sympathy for these chaps. I feel very, very conflicted in making this argument, but my point is you can't move the goalposts backwards. And linking to what you've just said a minute ago about, somebody else's killer was released, or I'm obviously not in that position, but you're saying to somebody, PC Harper's death is more important than your family member's death. Therefore, we're going to lock them up for longer, and that isn't fair. What you need to do...
Well, that's where we are already, as you say, because of the law. It's just that his actual killers aren't going to be subject to that law. But moving forward, if you kill an emergency worker, you will be treated differently from someone who kills you or me, Nick. Perish the thought.
No, I agree. But I think in the same way that you have a whole life term, you may need to just make some slight amendments to it will be a full-term sentence. You will not be eligible for early release. That would be the easiest way around it. But Andy Burnham needs to be very, very careful for what he gets involved with, because the next time this comes up, there will be precedent set. You got involved in this one for PC Harper's killers. You should be getting involved in this one, and then you're on a very difficult and sticky wicket for which ones are more important than others. The simplest approach is to have a blanket response of I'm not getting involved. That's for the judiciary, and the people in that offender category, for want of a better term, are going to be subject to early release. Now, like it or lump it, we can't do that. What he should be doing is potentially actually using this as leverage to argue that more money in the justice system, because that affects not just criminals but also victims. And saying, look, if we'd got better probation services, if we'd have more capacity to keep these people locked up, so I'm going to announce however many million to do this, and that means that these victims and their families can take solace in the fact that those people are going to be behind bars for longer.
Yeah, I see. I think you're probably right, but as you say, you don't really want to be that guy, do you? Saying no, let them out, because you can make all the intellectual arguments you want, but ultimately the headline that they would write about you would be Nick in Dudley wants them to be released. You don't particularly want them to be released. You just understand why, in the great scheme of things, it would be a bigger negative, and it might even be 52-48. It's not a black and white or a zero sum. It would be more bad than good, because what it says about the rule of law, what it says about the importance of not moving goalposts, basically.
Absolutely. I think if he'd got, he's come out with obviously a lot of rhetoric and stuff like that in the first couple of weeks of his premiership. If he had ambitions to change the justice system, this would be the way in, for the reason I've just said. We're going to put more money into the justice system so that we can have lesser dangerous people on the streets and keep the bad guys locked up.
And yet, in the meantime, he is going to somehow finesse the continuing incarceration of these two people, which, I mean, if it happened, you're not going to be out on the streets with a placard, are you? You're just going to think, oh, that's probably a mistake. And that's part of his calculation as well. That's quite a cynical political calculation. The people who are right won't be that upset about this, will they?
No. But if you act on fact, not feeling, James, to use an O'Brienism, if you're in the next cell along and you get released, having committed an offence at the same time for an offence and given a similar sentence length and released at the same time, is that justice? Because it should be proportionate to the crime committed.
Yeah, and you're right.
You should be treated equally.
Yeah, and as I say, I think that it will be a large part of the calculation. Will be, well, who's going to be upset? People who I've just thought about things for a little bit longer, and I don't mean that in a patronising or condescending way, because these are stories where your feelings almost always overcome the facts. And if Andy Burnham is legislating for people's feelings and ignoring essential facts, and, good luck to him. Let's hope that it doesn't have repercussions or set a precedent for other cases, because it's going to haunt him potentially. I agree with Nick about that. I agree with most of what Nick said, but you come to a point where what happens next time there's a case that is very... Look, you don't even need to say tabloid friendly or media friendly. You just need to say emotive. A very emotive case. And Andy Burnham will have demonstrated that if all the lawyers come out and say it can't be done, and all of the attorney generals have come out and said it can't be done, and 3 different justice secretaries have said it can't be done, and Andy Burnham comes along and says, yes, it can be done, it will be done, make it so, and it's done, then every single time there's something emotive in the news, he's going to be called upon to... Maybe that's the calculation he's made and thinks, I can live with it. I'll be able to explain to people why I can't do it this time. And in fact, he could even use this case as an explanation. Look, I would if I could, because I did when I could, but this time I could. I don't know. It's a good question, though. I'm glad I'm not Prime Minister.
James O'Brien on LBC.
11:48. Have a little listen to this, because bearing in mind what we've heard so far, I think this really cuts to the heart of what we're talking about. Listen to why Andy Burnham is doing what he's doing, and then we'll return to the question of whether he should be.
I've heard the depth of concern felt across the country about the potential release of the killers of PC Andrew Harper, and obviously I feel for the family and the anguish that they're going through. What I have done since I came into office is push the system every single day to go further. I've not accepted it's impossible to do more. I believe there is more that can be done. So today I have asked the Justice Secretary to present a plan in early September to Parliament to go further so that we do not have to release as many people early. And that plan will include issues like returning more foreign national offenders to their country of origin, and looking at the injustice of IPP sentences, which have led to young people, or young when they were imprisoned, being imprisoned indeterminately, and that clearly is unfair.
So if you break that into 4 parts, I'm worried about the first one. I really like the second one. Third one, again worried. Fourth one, yeah, great. The reason why I'm uncomfortable with the second bit is the first bit, depth of concern. Why are we doing this? Depth of concern from the public. Well, where does that come from? Who woke up thinking about this case, unless the story had been put there by people like me? Should that really be what informs the Prime Minister's decision to do something? Then the bit I love. Why do we accept that this is how the system works? Why can't it work differently? Why can't it? It doesn't matter whether you're talking about high streets or prisoners. And then towards the end, some ways that you could improve things, the IPPs, the indeterminate sentences, we've talked about that on the programme. We didn't talk about recalls. I think that should really be on the list. The idea that people are being recalled to jail who haven't committed crimes, they've breached the condition of their probation, or parole, right? Never 100% sure what the difference is between parole and probation, but you take my point. They haven't actually committed an objective crime. They've breached their release conditions, so they're back in jail. Having a look at that, people on remand, maybe releasing women. I don't know that public concern, the depth of concern should be enough. Ian's in Lancaster. Ian, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
I had a feeling you would cover this topic today, so I kept my ear tuned to the radio.
How flattering,
So,
thank you.
Cheers for having us on. So, so basically, I don't feel Andrew Harper's killers should be released. Not because he's a police or was a police officer, or that doesn't influence it at all. I think it comes down more to the complete disregard for the law of the perpetrators. Because the reason I feel that is you basically go to prison for two reasons, or you basically go there to be punished, but also to be rehabilitated. And in terms of earlier prisoner release, you really have to question rehabilitation. And if you look at the attitude of his killers, that if everybody, they might not remember the detail, but they tried to steal the quad bike initially, got seen off by the person who lived in the house, then came back later that day for a second go. So that was the attitude you're dealing with. But then to add insult to injury, you've got, as you've spoken about today, the photographic evidence and the court evidence of their attitude in court. Mocking the system.
But this isn't. I'm not arguing with anything you've said about the feelings it engenders, and that smirk, that twin smirk, is hideous to witness. And I mean, equally, we don't know for sure whether or not they've undergone some extraordinary process of rehabilitation. I'm happy to join you in thinking that that's unlikely. But this isn't our call, and it's not the Prime Minister's call either. The sentence is set by the court. You can't turn around later and say, hang on a minute, the public are very unhappy about this. Let's override the sentence that was handed down by the court.
Well, whether the public...
Where does it end? Where does it end, Ian? Who's next? Who's up next for you and me to decide whether or not they get early release or not?
Because if they get a release, it should be based on rehabilitation and proof.
Yeah, but it isn't. You can't
say
you can't answer a question about a case by answering a question about a system. We can all agree we don't like the system. Andy Burnham doesn't like the system. The system needs fixing. But this isn't a question about the system. This is a question about a case. And if in this case you allow, let me get the words right, it's a depth of concern to override the justice system, then where does it end? Who's next?
Well, didn't they do the same thing with Jamie Bolger's killers initially?
I can't remember, actually.
Yeah,
I think that had more... There was certainly the original point was not to disclose their identity.
Yeah.
I don't know that they were kept in jail differently from how other people would have been. I mean, in a way, that phone-in would be even trickier because... Are you really going to argue that a child is more culpable for a murder than an adult? So should a child...
It's not that. No, I'm not coming from that.
No, I know
angle.
you're not.
I'm coming from the point of you can overturn laws. You can intervene. I forget who it was.
On a specific case. Well, you obviously can, because they're going to do it. But he's told us why he's doing it, Ian, and he's doing it because of depth of public concern. So if I'm a newspaper owner, or God forbid, a rent-a-gob on the radio, I can help create higher levels of public concern. And I'm not sure that that's the rationale that a Prime Minister should be acting on.
But I think if the public have concern... It's not that the Prime Minister would necessarily react to that. It's that if you're
he's
going
just
to
said it. That's the phrase he used.
But that's the phrase he used. But everybody can just hang on to one phrase, can't they, and pin it on that.
Yeah, all right.
I'm sure he's got several other phrases. That
yeah, we'll agree. I agree. Andy Burnham has more than one phrase in his vocabulary.
Yeah, but it's not even about witch hunts and they don't deserve to come out because this and that. It does come down to rehabilitation, and I think it would be very difficult to convince the general public that
these guys deserve a break of any kind. But then you're back to the system, you see, and there'll be loads of people who are going to be they are going to be released early, who are just as unapologetic or as unremorseful as these two probably we think are. although we don't know. And I really recommend everybody has a look at the article that a brilliant journalist called Rachel Sylvester, used to be at the Times, she's now at the Observer, wrote this weekend about so-called Scandi wings in British prisons. They're experimenting with a scheme at Wandsworth Jail in South London and elsewhere, where the staff are hired, they come from a sort of graduate scheme, and it's people who are dedicated to rehabilitation. It's what Ian mentioned. It's a fascinating scheme. This was the first that I'd heard about it. They're called Vanguard Wings, and they've been set up in Wandsworth and Pentonville, two of the most challenging jails in the country. And what makes them different is not the people in there. They include some of the most violent and dangerous men in the prison system, including some who have previously assaulted staff. But what makes them different is the staff. The prison officers working on the Vanguard Wings are selected on the basis of their commitment to turning offenders' lives around. This is the Scandinavian approach, the rehabilitative approach, and that's what they're there for. They've had official training, they've had different training, additional training, they've spent time in a Swedish prison. Last month, some were at the Little Scandinavia Wing at the State Correctional Institution in Pennsylvania. It has cats and a dog. I mean, imagine, I think Nigel Farage is complaining about prisoners having colour televisions at the moment. God knows how he'd feel when he finds out that they've got a Zen garden and a therapy room at one in Donald Trump's United States of America. But if the figures demonstrate that this makes people measurably and considerably less likely to reoffend, why wouldn't you want that to be the system in place? And that informs part of Ian's point about rehabilitation. But unfortunately, if you make an exemption for these two, you send a message to the country that if you shout loud enough, you will get what you want. It is 11:58. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, and he has decided that it is his job to speak up for the public on this issue. It's that two parts now to the Burnham project that I think we've identified in the last few days. Part one is, what's the phrase I want? I don't want to call him a laxative, a political laxative, because that's a slightly indelicate imagery, but he refuses, like, say, an oil can. He refuses to accept that the machinery can't move. He is going to seek to move the machinery. And it's really interesting, isn't it, how many of the calls we get, today being a case in point, from the Northwest endorse the idea that he can do this. Whether you're pointing at the high street in Stockport, or whether you're talking about homelessness or other issues, or whether you're Anne in Makerfield, who's watched him very closely now for a while, they are much closer to believing it to be possible than those of us who are coming fairly cold to the Andy Burnham model. So point one is, just because everyone else says it can't be done doesn't mean it can't be done. Who doesn't welcome that? And then point two is reflecting public feeling. I am going to speak for the public on this issue, he said today. I take that duty very seriously indeed. And that's a good thing too. It only becomes a bad thing, potentially, when he's listening to the loudest voices.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 3 minutes after 12. Just a quick postscript to the conversation we had in the last hour. Back to my correspondent, No Hostages. That's the handle that they use on Blue Sky. More food for thought for you, I think. Harsher sentences for killing police officers are a good example of the sacralisation of social roles. We stop seeing the victim simply as a person and invest the uniform with a special moral value. The result is a hierarchy of victims. A criminal's conduct should determine their treatment, not how sympathetic their victims appear to the public. If Burnham continued in this way, then those who murder homeless drug addicts would be treated better than those who kill beloved celebrities. And, you know, as you read those words, you can imagine some people nodding along, can't you? And say, yeah, well, homeless drug addicts, of course, if you kill one of those, it's not as bad as if you kill my favourite radio presenter or my favourite actor or pop star. And I mean, it's, as I said, more food for thought. 4 minutes after 12 is the time. We move, I think, inevitably next to the weather, the climate. The heat wave, there's another one on the way. And, of course, we can see flames engulfing the New Forest at the moment, started by a van. I sometimes worry that we spend too much time in Idiot's Corner, but, you know, there are people out there who think that it's really relevant that lots of people have been arrested for arson or for starting fires, some deliberately, some by accident. There are concerns in France in particular about people who appear to be a little bit vulnerable getting arrested for throwing cigarette butts around but carelessly throwing a cigarette butt around and causing a fire. The reason why these are not arguments, and I'll explain it a little perhaps more kindly than I did last time, these are not proof that climate change isn't real, is because climate change doesn't start the fire necessarily. Climate change dries the tinder. Okay, so I really don't think there's any excuse for clinging on to this ludicrous argument once it's been politely explained to you. So what happened in the New Forest is that a van caught fire on a road, and everywhere around the road was so dry as a consequence of the fact that we haven't had any rain for about 100 years that it went up like a barbecue. The New Forest, right? So it doesn't matter whether or not it started because a van caught fire or because someone threw a cigarette butt out of their window or because, some sunlight went through a magnifying glass. Do you remember doing that as a kid? And landed on a leaf and the leaf caught fire. It doesn't matter. It's not the spark that is caused by climate change necessarily. It's the conflagration, because climate change has dried out the tinder and increased the temperature. It's the high temperatures have dried out the tinder. So I don't know. Does it help? I mean, if you are believing that, I'm kind of thinking you've probably made a decision some time ago to ignore all of the evidence and all of the facts and all of the science. But I don't know. Maybe I can reach you with that simple observation. And last time we talked about this, I lived by the clip, died by the clip. I got kebabbed by the clip, because I was trying to articulate the fact that a lot of us are wandering around simultaneously knowing that this is blooming awful, and there are elements of it that we are finding unawful. You know, the things that you can do on a nice day that you can't do when it's not a nice day, you are currently doing a lot. But unfortunately, if you hear half of that argument, if you don't hear the bit where I say, you know it's awful, you know it's catastrophic, you know it's apocalyptic, and you only hear me sounding like an ice cream man celebrating the fact that business is booming, then you're going to think I'm an idiot, which is often true. But on that occasion, it actually wasn't. But it's interesting to map your personal relationship with what's going on. And Mrs. O'Brien and I were walking the dog last night, and it was a conversation with her that had prompted that observation a couple of weeks ago about how many of us were thinking, well, it's nice to eat in the garden, just little things like that. But how guilty I feel for having that thought, because I'm, in a sense, minimising the response to the apocalypse that's unfolding around us. And we were out last night. I can't remember who said it first, but we're walking through, like you are now, a park where the grass isn't just dry. The grass is, it's gone. That's it now. We've got a weird thing in our garden. When the builder did it, I can't lie to you, I didn't fully understand what he was talking about. You know what happens when I've got builders in? I turn into the lost Mitchell brother. I start talking like an extra from EastEnders. Yeah, all right, mate. Yeah, nice one. And he's explaining to me why he's digging some reservoir in the back garden. It's something to do with what happens when the drain overflows. And it meant we got a little digger. It came into the back garden. I got to drive it around a bit as well. So I was all for it. But I didn't fully understand what he was doing. You'll know if you're in the trade or if you pay attention when people explain things to you. But so the middle of our lawn is still green because there's a blooming great water reserve under there, which is where all the water goes to make sure that our drains don't overflow. Does that make sense? Anyway, whatever. The rest, so it's like an inverted egg with a green yolk and then almost white now grass, almost yellow grass. But we were out last night and I mean, it's just extraordinary how dry. You've had moments where you've noticed it in the past, but it's when you're in parks, if you're a town or a city dweller, it's when you're in parks that you really take on board how bonkers this is, how utterly arid all of our shared spaces are, all of our green spaces are utterly, utterly arid. And that's not a word I've ever used on the radio before. That's an interesting marker of where we are at the moment. Everything is arid. And I can't remember who said it first, but it was an acknowledgement that the novelty, the short-lived novelty of being able to have more barbecues than usual and to, have a Vimto in the garden of an evening, that's gone. In fact, I bumped into a neighbour yesterday and she said, how are you coping with the weather? A week ago, we would have been saying, are you enjoying the weather? Or how are you, but how are you coping? And I said, not well, actually, because I'm starting to get scared. And I don't really know why. It had something to do, it's called a soakaway. Well done, everybody. I told you you'd know more about this than I did. Have you got a soakaway, Keith? Well, you wouldn't in a flat, would you? Okay, I know you've got aircon and awnings. Keith's got awnings. Awnings Keith, they call him now. I don't know why I was getting scared. I might ask you, actually. But obviously I'm more interested in whether you're getting scared. That's the thing, isn't it? It's so weird. How many times have we sat here and wondered, what's it going to take? And we watched flash floods. We watched wildfires. A little bit further away than the New Forest, but, not on the other side of the world or anything like that. We watched behaviour that was, or rather we watched scenes and images that were shocking on our doorstep, metaphorically speaking. Is that going to work? Is that going to change us? And it's only yesterday that I fully grasped the fact that fear is the key currency here. It's fear. And forgive me if this is obvious to you, but it took me a while to get my head around it. We don't like being scared. I know we sell more tickets for the ghost train than we do for the Speak Your Weight machine, but that's managed fear. We know what we're doing when we're queuing up for the ghost train. We know what we're doing when we're watching a horror film. So when I say we don't like being scared, don't zing back at me by saying, ha, 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 I think you'll find that Friday the 13th was the most popular film of 1982. No, we don't like being scared. Uncontrollable fear of things over which we have no control. All right? We can give ourselves frissons and thrills of fear by watching films or going on roller coasters or whatever it is, but we don't like fear. We don't like fear. Think about death for a moment, if you would. That's fear. Don't want to die. So what do we do when we have fear? Do you remember me telling you in the early days of lockdown that I felt that it would be cowardly to wear a mask? I'm so glad I get to talk to you every day because I can work through the times when I'm obviously being a bit of a plonker. I'm walking through Leicester Square. I was still coming to work. Not everybody was. But masks were not mandatory. They were not required to wear a mask. But everybody who knew what they were talking about was kind of going down the better safe than sorry route. Whether you kind of don't phone me about masks for God's sake, all right? But I'd see people wearing masks, and I've seen people from Asia wearing masks for years in central London, tourists. And I just found myself thinking, well, I'm not going to wear a mask. I'm not going to announce that I'm scared of this virus. I don't want anybody to think that I'm scared. It's a very male thing, isn't it? It's probably a consequence of upbringing. I don't want to look scared. I'm not going to wear a mask. And I articulated that to you. And by explaining to you what I was feeling and what I was doing, I could see pretty clearly how silly I was being. Why would you not wear a mask? Well, I don't want people to think... Because so few people were wearing them. You'd see a bloke wearing one and you'd think, oh, you big girl's blouse. Which is pathetic. It's ridiculous to think that. But not only do we not like fear, not only do we not like being scared, we don't like other people knowing that we're scared. It's probably primal, that. It's probably evolutionary. If you know that I'm scared, you're more likely to try and rob me, aren't you? Or you're more likely to bash me over the head and steal my... I don't know, I usually use the wrong thing here and talk about dinosaur steaks, and you point out that there was no period where dinosaurs were cohabiting with you. But you take my point. If I send out fear, it's like they say about dogs, can sense your fear. Remember when you tell the kids that, or when Mum told you that? The dog can sense your fear. So you think, oh, God, please don't let the dog sense my fear. You get more scared, but you're putting more effort into not looking like you're scared when you are scared. So we don't like being scared, right? And we don't like people knowing that we're scared. This is a phone-in about being scared. Because I think we should be, shouldn't we? I don't want to hear about power stations in China or even Daily Telegraph editorials about. I just want to talk about being scared, and not permanently scared. Just walking around last night, looking at the state of the ground I was walking on, and then at my weather app, and looking at the fact that it's going to get even hotter. I think Thursday is the killer. No sign of rain on my app. Again, don't at me with no sign of rain until Sunday. And last time there was a little rain icon on my app. It didn't actually arrive. It looks like things will get better at the end of this week. But who here thinks that next summer is going to be like a summer in the 80s or a summer in the 90s? And as soon as you start feeling scared, you start putting effort into not feeling scared. And we're back to the Leonardo DiCaprio film. That's why you don't look up. That's why you don't look up. Because if you look up, oh my Lord, you're scared. So don't look up. I guess last night I couldn't avoid it. And I walked through parks, of course I have, but just something about my mood, something about the moment, something about the conversation I was having with my wife, just sort of, we both stopped and sort of went, oh, flipping heck. This is really bad. This is really, really bad. Have I got a question for you that goes beyond? Yeah, okay. It's not just, are you scared? It's, when did you get scared? When and why did you get scared? I felt a very different type of fear last night to any that I felt before. I don't like feeling frightened, and I don't want you to know that I'm frightened, but I'm being honest with you because, these things are rather more important than my misgivings or sensibilities. I just want to know when you started feeling, because I'm surprised by the quality of the fear that I felt last night. It's different from anything that I felt before, and it will go away again. It already is going away again. I'm sitting in an air-conditioned studio. I'm not frightened now, but just something last night as we walked through the park about the, is it aridity or aridness? About the aridity of the terrain, the absolute bone-dry nature of it. Coming shortly after I'd been watching the footage of a part of the country I know well, the New Forest, up in flames because a van caught fire and it went off as if the land had been laced with petrol. That's what it went off like. And I just thought, this is actually something that we should be scared, more scared about. So, how scared are you? 17 minutes. Just seriously, let's just talk about it, because it's not necessarily a conversation that you can be able to have everywhere else. You sit down next to someone in the bus queue and go, hello, I'm really scared. Are you? But we can probably have a crack at it. I am frightened of what this means. I'm not even thinking about children or potential future grandchildren, but this is the direction of traffic now, right? How does this sound to someone who's been scared for 10 years? Because you've got to come up with a better late than never on this. You can't have a crack at us for not having been on board sooner. And don't hate me for the fact that I'm saying I'm gonna be less scared tomorrow. I'm going to be less scared this time next week because it will have rained a bit and the temperatures won't be so high. So how scared are you? How do we hold on to the fear when it's no longer Scorchio outside? I don't know that we can as human beings. I think we go back, don't we? Go back to complacency. We go back to, because you can't look up at heat when it's not hot. I want to talk about fear. I want you to talk to me about fear. 0345 6060973. And there are other elements to this. Stories about crop failure, mass wildfires becoming an annual event, and of course mass migration from the places that are considerably worse affected than we are. And you've already seen how some people in this country will talk about refugees and asylum seekers, how they'll treat them. That's something else to be scared of. I might read you that line from 1984 about the refugee being used for target practice and the cinema audience watching it in England cheering. And it's fiction. It's George Orwell. Fear. How scared are you? When did you get scared? And how do we stop ourselves becoming unscared again? When we know, deep down, We don't want to be scared. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. All right? Hit the numbers now. You will get through. We're talking about fear. Fear. 12:20.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 21 minutes after 12 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. An amber warning for extreme heat has been issued by the Met Office for Thursday, where some parts of England could face temperatures of up to 38 degrees centigrade. And alongside that explanation of why, even if 1 million people are arrested for arson in areas where there have been wildfires, it doesn't challenge the fact that climate change is real and causing wildfires. We must also put the fact that this is not going to be news soon. How far away do you think the day is where we don't say? Well, you'll announce it. The Met Office but they did that last week and the week before, and next week and the week after that. That's terrifying, right? Why? Maybe the phoning we should be having. Why aren't we more scared? Patrick's in Epsom. Patrick, what made you pick up the phone?
Yeah, because the subject today resonates with me because what I'm afraid of is the individuals that are in charge of making a difference, not making a difference, not taking it seriously, because I believe that there is something that we can do about it, and we're not doing it. We're not doing what we need to do about it. It's not something that's at the forefront of any kind of national emergency. I feel like the suits, the higher-ups, the politicians are more into playing their political games. And when I say that, they're more concerned about defence spending than the whole earth being shriveled up into a ball of dryness. And the idea of them not being reactive to this is, I think, is criminal. I think it's criminal. It's tantamount to lighting a wildfire yourself. They are responsible for the pails of water that douse the heat that this earth is experiencing at the moment, and they're choosing not to douse the planet with what is necessary in order to deal with climate change. It's obvious. Every single year, our temperatures are rising. Sorry, excuse me.
Don't say that. Crikey, since when do I get to tell other people to talk less or be briefer?
It's absolutely shocking. And the individuals sorry to just bang on.
Fill your boots, Patrick, seriously.
The individuals that get put in charge of things like the environment, it seems like they're paper tigers. They have no power. We look at individuals who I think are relatively sincere about their mission, people like Fergal Sharkey, people like Ed Miliband, and they're almost subordinate politicians in the case of Ed Miliband when he was Environment Secretary. And I don't even understand why it would take somebody like Fergal Sharkey to be raising awareness about the condition of our waterways, and action not being taken in respect to that. You'd think that all he'd need to do is raise the alarm, and then the people that are supposed to be taking care of us would look into it and be like, okay, so our waters are polluted. Okay, so the temperatures are affecting the crops. Okay, so the temperatures are affecting our green belt that we hold so dear to our hearts, but not dear enough in order to, in effect, make sure that we do what we need to do in order to protect them fully.
I mean, you are obviously right, and yet your depth of feeling is not widely reflected among the population, not just among politicians, but among the population in general as well. It's as if we know that we should be feeling what you're feeling, but most of us are not. When did you feel your thoughts head into this place?
For the last 20 years, to be fair.
Really?
My family and I generally go to a holiday in France in August, and we will tend to travel towards the south of France. So it's quite obvious. The further south you get, the more arid it is.
But that's always been true, though.
But to this extreme?
No, well, clearly not. But you were able, because of the annual visit, you were able to clock the ticking,
Absolutely.
as it were. So in areas that started off hotter, they're ahead of us when it comes to the drying out of the land.
James, I tend to holiday initially in a place called Auxerre in France. When I first met my wife and we holidayed there, at mid-August, it used to be it could be overcast, it could be quite rainy. This year, we are leaving the temperatures that we generally head towards, which is quite It just feels strange. We're leaving England when the temperatures are in the mid-30s to head towards our stated goal, which is head towards the heat of the Mediterranean, but we have it right here.
Even more madly, the holiday I was on a month ago in Greece the weather was cooler than it was back home every time I checked on my phone. I don't know what we're supposed to make of that, but your central point is true. The fear. How do we do the fear? What do we do with the fear? Why? You mean I think you're a gardener, aren't you, Patrick?
Well, I myself and my children, we are trying to, in effect, establish some type of self-sustainability within the space of our garden. But, James, I can't blame the general public. The general public tend to, in effect, believe the news that they are fed. At the moment, we are told that there's an immigration crisis. So that's at the forefront of the working man's mind when it comes to the problems that we are experiencing in this country. It's the messaging. It's the messaging. It's the people who we pay our taxes to, that we rely upon to take care of us, to be honest and truthful. It's the messaging.
It is the messaging. And of course, the prioritisation and the distraction tactics. Sometimes it's done for populist reasons. Sometimes it's done for reasons that are almost impossible to decipher. Good Lord, Patrick. I mean, and that's part of the problem as well, because you hear someone who's on it, and do you want to be like that? There's no criticism of Patrick whatsoever, but you kind of understand. My friend Emma gets like full on terrified about this. When I allow myself to think about it, I have cut-offs for my own mental health. My soul shuts down. I know in my bones that we are absolutely doomed as a species. It's a tragedy greater than any genocide, any atom bomb, any massacre we've ever managed, and it's going to happen crushingly, torturously slowly, with everyone biting and clawing to stay on top of the heap until the very last second that the atmosphere can still support our breathing. I mean, there's an upbeat element to her analysis as well. We can slow it if we all drag in the same direction. It inverses the point that Patrick's making. Political decisions against big business, 75% to cover that, but 25% is changing people's mindsets, recognising that the planet is a living system. And I felt that fear last night. I felt a frisson of that fear, but I'm not going to feel it as deeply and as permanently as Emma does or as Patrick does. And I kind of want to, but don't want to at the same time. And that's part of the problem, isn't it? That's part of the problem, is that we do not like being frightened. So let's pretend we're not. And the better you are at pretending, the more effective, obviously, that will be. Sarah's in Lambeth. Actually, Sarah, I'm just glancing at Keith's face, not the clock. I've stopped looking at the clock. I'm just looking at Keith's face now to work out what time it is. Just bear with me a moment. Judging by Keith's face, I haven't got time to take a call from Sarah, so we will I get you on first after the news, I promise. It's coming up to 12:30. I do sometimes, of course, look at the clock. And the other story that I loved this week, or today, was the one about Jess Phillips, if you weren't with us earlier, pretending she was sick when it was her turn to go out and defend Peter Mandelson, former Home Office Minister. Talking to Ian Dale at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival yesterday, said that she'd get the call for backing Mandelson or sticking up for Mandelson, and she'd say, I pretended I was sick. Lovely stuff. It is coming up to 12:30, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Here is Matt Hewitt.
James O'Brien on LBC.
12:32 is the time. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where the conversation is about fear and why some of us have it and some of us don't, or all of us have it, but to such varying degrees that some of us might as well not, while others can think of little else. And these moments, the New Forest is on fire. Your local park is yellow. I mean, yellow everywhere is yellow. Trees will probably die in the coming weeks as a consequence of the fact that they haven't got anything like enough water. And Christmas will come, and, I mean, real Wallies will say, oh, God, it's freezing out, so much for global warming. I presume that line of argument is beginning to diminish in all but the most sort of reformy circles. But for the rest of us, we will subconsciously recalibrate and stop being frightened until next summer, when we'll have to get frightened again. And I just want to talk about fear. Sarah is in Lambeth. Sarah, what would you like to say?
Hi.
Hello.
Great to talk to you, James.
Likewise.
Thank you for talking about this subject. It
not really at the moment.
Me.
Has it really?
It has petrified me for about 20 years.
Go on.
20 years ago, I was doing my PhD, and we had someone from BP. He used to work for BP, and he was now a consultant who came in, really well-dressed, very well put together, looked like he'd stepped out of an Eton poster. He came in to talk to us about how to communicate our science.
Okay.
And he gave a little bit of background about what he had done. He had been in charge of parts of their marketing or whatever in the Caribbean, and he talked about how what a great life it was. I didn't really know anything about petrochemical industry at the time.
Okay.
So the internet was coming up. I started looking up things. And one of the first things I came across was how the petrochemical industry scientists were the ones in the 70s and 80s who had been talking about climate change, and they had been shut down.
Yeah.
Their lives had been made so difficult. Some of them ended up, jobless. It had made their family lives very difficult. They were, they were trying to sound the bells. They were trying to tell people that this is serious. People need to wake up. But no one listened at the time. And from there, I started looking at other things. I started talking to a couple of friends. I became a science teacher. So that was kind of like fertile soil.
Yes.
But what I found was there were people, educated, really well-educated, very well-read people, who would not engage with it at all. They wanted nothing to do with it. But I had a couple of friends who were very, very invested in this. They started working with Just Stop Oil, they started working with Extinction Rebellion, and they were sidelined. People made fun of them. People didn't engage with them. They were really, really harsh about them. But we were like, this is real. This is affecting us now. And as Patrick said, I've worked in the south of France, and I saw the difference there. Last year, my husband and I decided we're not actually going to go away in the summer. Because we're paying so much to go away somewhere else that's the same temperature. And I don't actually like to fly in the first place.
No, and of course the impacts of that are relevant as well. We were having that conversation last night, actually. I don't know if you're familiar. Do you know Donald Perlman, the lawyer and lobbyist who was widely regarded as the godfather of climate change denial? I only learned about him a couple of years ago because the RSC did a play about him called Kyoto and his attempts to scupper the first big climate deal. But what you reflect is the effort that was put in to ridiculing your friends and colleagues and to rubbishing the science. Do you think, I don't think that the word optimism has much place in this conversation, but do you think as we live with the unavoidable consequences of what you're describing, we are going to get collectively frightened enough to demand political action? I mean, I don't know is the short answer, which is why I'm asking you.
So my family is originally from the global south.
Yeah.
And I think the power of these decisions still rests with the north.
Yeah.
When you see what happens at the climate summits, these people come in, they're impassioned, they've brought in all the evidence. And everything is sidelined or made to seem inferior to the profit margins of the big companies. If you look at how much money the oil companies have made and the petrochemical industry has made just since the Strait of Hormuz started, it's completely insane. We're paying for this. People are being inconvenienced right now. But no one seems to want to take a stand on it.
Well, they do. I mean, you've kind of answered your own question there. I think people do want to take a stand on it, but they get shouted down, or they get ridiculed, or they get cowed. They get attacked into silence. I mean, the most powerful thing you said when you came on was talking about the families of the people that were trying to tell the truth about the science being targeted or being, to the point where you say, Dad, do you really have to do this, or can we not just? Why can't you get a nice job in corporate law or something like that? Why do you have to do this and that and the other? But so you don't hold much hope in the short term that just simply the experiences we are having in the global north at the moment are going to be enough to make more people feel things as keenly as you do?
I don't know. I remember going to a talk by Berners-Lee when he wrote There's No Planet B. And that went on to become kind of like a meme.
Yeah.
People say it all the time, but do they actually understand what that means?
I mean, and then, of course, you recognise the point that Patrick made, which is it's the politicians that need to be doing this stuff, not the punters, and the politicians won't do it unless the punters need to. Okay, and how many people have just heard the echo of Andy Burnham's voice talking about PC Andrew Harper's killers, talking about the quality of public opinion being so great that it was irresistible. And this is, not a criticism of his attitude towards Andrew Harper's killers, but that was the phrase I wrote down when we played out that little clip. I'm not going to be able to find now my notes, but that was the thing that jumped out of me, the question of whether or not it's a good thing or a bad thing for a Prime Minister to be essentially responding so completely to public feeling. And the public feeling about climate change is not enough for the Prime Minister to think that it's the most important thing in his interest, Sarah. It just isn't, is it? He's not doing it. Sorry, I've got two Sarahs. That was Sarah in Lambeth, thank you. This is Sarah in Uxbridge. Sarah, what made you pick up the phone?
I picked up the phone because it's a different sort of fear that I fear now. I walked over the park, my local park, this morning, and I'd just come back before you started this conversation, which is brilliant that you're having.
Yes.
And I'd already said to my daughter, I was really afraid in that park because it's so dry.
Yeah.
It can catch light in any direction, and we're planning to go out there to experience the eclipse tomorrow.
Oh, yes.
And I'm thinking, is it safe? I know that, but it's immediate fear in that, and what we need are immediate plans. We need to know if something catches fire in our road, what do we do?
You're talking about the really, you just said the phrase immediate fear, aren't you? You're talking about the fear of your house, of your community catching fire.
Exactly.
Wow. Yeah, of course you are. Of course you are.
Well, I think that's a real fear, and this is why more people are feeling it now.
Yes.
Because if a car, we've seen the wild places going up, but if cars start going up, and we need a plan. We don't want to be this afraid. A fear is we have fear for a reason, so that we can react. But we mustn't react with the fear. We must react through our intellect, and we must have plans that make sense.
And you have to talk about it all the time in order to keep the fear alive, even when the weather has calmed down again, briefly or temporarily. So the problem I've got, Sarah, and I can't expect you to particularly worry about this, is that it's not traditionally brilliant phone-in territory. This phone-in is probably the best we've had in a long time about...
I've really enjoyed this phone-in.
So have I, actually.
I've agreed with every single person that's spoken.
But we couldn't do it all day, every day, even though on one level that's absolutely what we should be doing.
But we must get to the point where we're making the plans, or we can't expect the council to do it, or the government to do it without the people doing it.
Or without the people demanding that they do it. That phrase that I couldn't remember.
Demanding it and being part of the solution. Because when the solution is taken, there's a disconnect. And it's when they're doing water planning, they're not looking at the actual rivers and the actual reservoirs and the actual terrain. People will know which bits are going to catch fire, which bits are furthest away from any water.
You're a bit ahead of the rest of us. I think I'm still thinking largely in the abstract, even though my thoughts in the abstract are prompted by what I can see in the immediate. You're thinking of both. You're thinking of the relationship between what you can see immediately outside your window or as you walk through the park, but also in the consequences of that for the abstract, the way that things need to move and respond. Sarah, thank you. And my job, for such as it is to just keep an eye on or find ways of keeping the conversation front and centre, keeping the conversation in the public arena. It is 12:42. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Theo is in Islington. Theo, what made you pick up the phone?
Hello, James. So I am afraid. I've been afraid for a long old while about this since, first watching Al Gore's film at school in about, I think it was 2008.
I watched that, and it didn't land with me as well. I mean, it did. I remember bits from it, like a Republican mayor who was changing his whole town because the threats of flooding he'd managed to sell to the community as having a commercial impact on them. Therefore, we should get ready for it, rather than as an environmental argument. And Al Gore was kind of like, I don't care who my allies are on this. I don't care who... I think I met him, actually, at that period. Going back a long time, aren't we? 2008, like you say. And I mean, it landed with you in ways that it didn't with me, because, I don't know, maybe I'd...
Well, I say that, but it's been a sort of constant background hum of fear. And now that tone is rising to a sort of warning siren. But I also want to counsel a bit of caution when it comes to fear. Fear is a useful emotion. It acts as that warning siren. It tells us something is potentially wrong. But if we let it metastasize into despair, that can lead to inaction. And that is actually a tool that those bad actors who have helped propagate this crisis, who hopefully one day will face their reckoning once we're done dealing with it, will use to try to slow down the response that is needed. What we need to do is ignore that and hammer our fear into resolve, into action.
And the political will still isn't there. I mean, we're still... I mean, you know, I don't even... Well, I think I do, that if we just stop immediately, as widely and as deeply as possible, setting fire to fossil fuels, then it would be a beginning of a recovery or the beginning of some sort of recalibration. But the political will to do that is not there. And that phrase that Andy Burnham used, I knew it was relevant for a reason. He talked about depth of concern, not breadth of concern. So you can send me, as Beatrice has done, the polling that shows climate concern is huge among the population. But depth of concern is different from breadth of concern. So that's what's changing. The depth of our concern, it's what Theo just articulated. The depth of our concern is growing. That's fear. The difference between the immediate and the abstract, fear of what the future holds, not just for you, but for your children, for your planet, for your species. And that is as if our feet are, forgive the rather clumsy analogy, our feet are getting ever closer to the fire on this. And the New Forest is on fire. And wherever you are in England, certainly, in most of Wales, I think Scotland's had quite a bit of rain lately, but generally speaking, wherever you are at the moment, you look outside at what was green, it's now yellow and will be for the foreseeable future. And then it won't be, and you'll stop being frightened again. But the depth of concern means that you'll be, this is even clumsier language, you'll be less unfrightened than you were before. There'll be a residual fear that grows every year until perhaps we become somehow capable of persuading our political masters that this is the single most important thing on their agenda, on their to-do list. It's 12:46.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 12:49 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I'm just reflecting on that simple question of whether or not we can talk about this more than we do already. And of course the answer is going to be partly. We can probably talk about it for as long as the weather is scaring us. And then when the weather stops scaring us, we won't be able to talk about it in quite the same way that we are. So we will definitely talk about it again before the end of this week. But I just want to take a moment, if I may, to indulge in a little bit of petty feuding. I don't know if you were listening on Friday when we had quite a lot of fun at the expense of Dick Littlejohn, the Daily Mail columnist, who usually relies on 20-year-old episodes of The Bill to provide his social commentary. What do you do? It's the first rule of journalism, really, is if someone tells you it's raining and someone else tells you it isn't, what do you do? Do you report both sides as somehow being equal, or do you stick your head out of the window to find out for yourself? So he's talking about me again in the Daily Mail today, and I won't dwell on it unduly, but I think that if you were listening on Friday, you'll find this extraordinary attempt to pretend... Well, you listen for yourself. I'm told LBC Rent-A-Gob radio host James O'Brien reacted in a predictably petulant way to my column on Friday. Good. Obviously, I didn't hear it. As soon as the excellent Nick Ferrari finishes at 10 a.m, I switched straight over. But readers who did tune in tell me it was the most spectacular on-air meltdown since Peter Finch's I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore tirade as a deranged TV presenter. Apparently, O'Brien's always slagging off the Daily Mail, and me in particular. And then he writes, who cares? Should just have a little think about that. If you've got a column in national newspaper and you can write about whatever you want, and in your last 2 columns you've written about me, you can't really write "who cares, mate," you sausage. It's a badge of honour coming from a poisonous public school tosseur like him, posing as a tribune. He knows a lot about me, doesn't he, for someone who never tunes in or listens to the show? Here's a new one. O'Brien, like Meghan Markle, has his own truth and a tendency to believe only what he wants to believe. And then we're back to the stuff we covered on Friday, championing fantasists like convicted paedophile Carl Beach, who, of course, was held up as an example of what brilliant journalism the Daily Mail was doing. Anti-Tory smear merchants, including nonce finder General Tom Watson and most recently disgraced Professor Jason Arday, which, of course, we spoke about for an hour on Friday as well. Yet he throws his toys out of his pram when I tell the real truth about him, he writes, having not listened to it, allegedly. So if you did listen to it on Friday, do you recognise any of this at all, this depiction of what we did? Like so many on the left who delight in viciously trolling those with whom they disagree. Again, he's a bit of a student of my work, this guy, considering that he never... But anyway, who cares? Who cares, Dick? The great Julie Burt, he can dish it out, but he can't take it. I'm taking it. This is literally what I'm doing. I'm taking it and I'm laughing at you. The great Julie Birchall, formerly of this parish, has a perfect expression to describe cowardly, smug prigs like O'Brien. Who cares, Dickie? Who cares, eh? Not you. Cowardly, smug prigs like O'Brien. Cry bully. I'm a cry bully. So you got a choice here with Richard Littlejohn. He hasn't called me a failure anymore because I was showbiz editor of the Daily Express when I left Fleet Street, a job that his hero Paul Dacre's father also sought to hold one day. And he hasn't taken the mickey out of me for selling suits back in the day either, because presumably all of these people writing to him to tell him that I've had a massive meltdown have pointed out that it makes it look like he's being condescending to people with normal jobs. But listen, if you take this nonsense at face value, you have one choice to make. Is Richard Littlejohn writing columns about things he knows absolutely nothing about, me, or is he a liar? Liar? Or writing columns, being too thick to realise that he's literally admitting in print that he writes columns about things he has no knowledge, experience or understanding of. Listen, I don't want to be unkind. I don't want to be a quai bully. I think it's, having read his work over the years, because I would never critique somebody, obviously, professionally, without familiarising myself with their work. That would just be weird, right? I think it's the latter. I don't think he is a liar. I think he routinely writes... Oh, no, hang on a minute. It's both, isn't it? He is a liar, and he routinely writes columns about things he has no experience, understanding or knowledge of. Mind how you go, Dick. Dan's in Skipton. Back to the fear. Dan, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Thanks for having me on, and thanks for having this conversation.
You're very welcome. I probably shouldn't have indulged myself then in the middle of a conversation about the future of the planet, but that's the way us quai bullies operate, Dan. What's on your mind?
Oh, no, I quite enjoyed it. Thank you. Yeah, I'm a former airline pilot, actually, and when I stopped flying about 6.5 years ago because of my conflict, I suppose. I was aware of the impact of aviation, and that's kind of a weird way into it, really, isn't it? You're doing a job which is causing a kind of disproportionate harm, impact, and it's through that awareness that you become aware of, there's, suppose, an anxiety around it, but also making a decision to do something completely different. And
Flipping heck. How did that go down with your family? I hope that's not an inappropriate question to ask.
No, not at all. I mean, it was really hard. I love flying. My grandfather flew in the war. He flew commercially in the 50s, 60s, 70s. My dad flew. I'd always wanted to fly since I was really young, and honestly, it was a difficult decision for me. And I think they were surprised. It wasn't necessarily what they wanted to happen, and but it's just, I think, just reflecting on that experience of doing the job, of knowing the impact of that job, and feeling that conflict, and it's quite painful, I think, when you really connect with that.
You're a better man than me, I think. To put your principles so far ahead of your professional advancement is extraordinary to witness. What really clinched it? Because I hope that's not a silly question, but, walking through the park last night, I felt things inside me shift. What was it for you? What was the big shift? Because they haven't shifted for me anywhere near as much as they must have done for you to take a completely different part in life.
what was interesting is that one of the areas of training that I actually delivered within the airlines I work for was in like human factors. So this is the non-technical areas of training. And a lot of that was around decision making. And one of the big things we talk about, in terms of how pilots can make decisions that help us to be free from bias, is understanding our cognitive bias and understanding the things that could mean that we actually might not make the right decision. And I think I became really aware of how our brains work. And I recognized that I was looking for all the reasons why it was okay, and I was dismissing all the reasons why it wasn't.
Yeah, well, we do. That's hiding from fear, right? That's persuading ourselves not to be frightened. That's what I was trying to talk about.
And exactly, and I realised that I was doing that at a much broader level. If you get an indication in a cockpit that you've got a fuel leak, your brain will do everything you can to find out, to look for reasons why you don't, because having a fuel leak is really inconvenient. So you have to be trained as a pilot to think free of bias and to actually to not ask why don't we have a fuel leak, but why do we have a fuel leak? Yeah. And I realised that I was doing that at a bigger scale. So when I kind of asked myself, actually, what would I think if it wasn't for the fact that I'd always wanted to fly, that I love flying, that I'm benefiting from it financially, and I was presented with this science, and I knew I was going to now become a parent, so I'm now thinking, 100 years ahead, or 80 years ahead, not just 50 years ahead. What would I think? And the answer to that question was really different. And when I kind of sat with that, and then when I kind of explored, okay, what is the aviation industry doing? What is their answer to this? They were celebrating 15% improvements in efficiency, whilst kind of not talking about the projected 50% increase in growth.
Oh, wow.
The greenwash was just, it didn't sit well. It's not really about saying it's anti-flying. It's about being pro-truth and pro sort of realistic solutions. And so that's why we started Safe Landing, the group we've got of aviation workers, because what we want to do is create a community of people within the sector who feel similar. We know that, as you said, the breadth of people that are concerned about this is huge. And they feel that conflict. And what we want to do is support them to be a positive voice for change, because we need a lot more people talking about this a lot more of the time.
But that's such a mad thing to hear, isn't it? It's because you sit here as a phone. Forgive me to bring my job into it, but we've talked a bit about yours. I sit here as a phone. I was thinking, I can't talk about this more than I do. And you're 100% right that we as a species have to.
Yeah.
And you as a profession, do you want to give the group a name? Do you want to give it a shout, or is it?
It's called Safe Landing. Yeah, we're a community of aviation workers, and the idea is we really want to engage anyone who works in aviation or anyone who's connected to aviation. If you're a person that depends on aviation to see family members abroad, if you're someone that deeply loves flying or studying flying or working in aviation, but you have this sense of discomfort that I know that it's also not doing what it needs to do. It's not on the right trajectory.
You're not alone.
To become part of a livable future. You're not alone, and we need your voice. We need you to be part of this community, because the industry is not going to change. Regulators, government at the moment, at least, the direction we're seeing airport expansion still very much on the table.
Listen, I can tell I'm going to have to interrupt you. You're beginning to sound like I do at 10:10 in the morning, as if you could talk uninterrupted forever. But we just Sheila Fogarty sniggering in the background. A complete lack of recognition of what I just described. Thank you, Dan. We'll talk again, I promise. And indeed, maybe tomorrow we'll return to this, because Justin and Mark are waiting. Francis is waiting. Fiona's waiting. Paul's waiting. Neil's not waiting. It says here he's called in to complain. So I don't think he'll be ringing in tomorrow if we return to this territory. Or maybe he's complaining about Sheila Fogarty.
Send him to me.
Possibly complaining about Sheila Fogarty not being on soon enough. So let me detain you no longer. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on our free Global Player app or the LBC app, where you can stay up to date with all the latest news, videos and opinion. You can listen to a range of podcasts, including James O'Brien Daily, the best bits from my LBC show every day. So do download the official LBC app for free from your app store now. Coming up at 4 on LBC, it's Tom Swarbrick. But now it's time for Sheila Fogarty.
James O'Brien on LBC.